they're aware of the situation, but I'll contact them again.
And I mean, he's probably missed 8 out of the last 9 meetings, give or take.
I doubt he's been here this year, actually, but
No, I don't. I think maybe once this
maybe
year.
January.
I thought there might have been 1 meeting he made because I think I even gave him a little grief about, hey, glad you could join us kind of thing. Right.
Joe, you wouldn't happen to have a handy copy of our bylaws, would you? Because I don't have that handy.
I do.
I could grab one. I don't think it doesn't say anything about removal of a member.
Well, because we don't have that authority. That it's a city appointment. Only they have that authority. But it should say something about. Well, I just don't recall. Gosh, I did those a long time ago.
Yeah.
I've got it right here, Charlie. I'll look through it real quick.
Okay, good.
And it is 6 o'clock, so let's get started. I did notice we have 21 participants who've joined us, not including our commission. So we'll hopefully make this as quick and efficient meeting as possible. So,
Mr. Chairman, may I interrupt you for 1
yes, sir.
second? Charlie, when you find the section on that, if you do, could you just take a photograph of it and text it to me or email it to me?
I can do that.
And that way I can take a look at that before we get to the end of the meeting.
Okay, let me go grab my phone while Mark's getting us started.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you,
I'll
Mr.
give it a
Chairman.
second then. So, because we, well, I guess we'll need them for a quorum 5. So I'll give it a second. And then maybe Mrs. Singer or Dewan will join us. I guess we have 8, so 4 would be a quorum, right, Charlie? Perkins?
No, it's still 5.
All right.
We do. Mark, we do have James is here with me in the
Oh,
office.
that's right. I didn't include him. Thank you very much. So we do have 5, including James. So let's get started while Charlie's grabbing his phone. Special meeting, Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission agenda for November 12th, 2020 at looks like 6:02 p.m. We'll run right through as we always do. Commission business under 1, A, approval of October invoices. I need a motion to approve the October invoices.
I'll make the motion.
I think I heard a motion by Mrs. Mizell. I didn't hear a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed? Good. And then line item B, approval of the October 8th, 2020 minutes. So I need a motion for the minutes from the meeting from October 8th.
Motion.
You got a motion by Mr. Vest,
Second.
second by Mrs. Mizell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passes. Okay, and then C, approval of the November agenda. So I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion.
Make a motion.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Vest, seconded by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and anybody opposed? Oh, there is one. I'll get to it, I guess. Never mind. Item D, items for postponement or withdrawal. So in the workshop, we talked about under old business PDP-2020-41, the Villages of Fall Creek Amended Master Plan. Request to amend the master plan for remaining lots in Phase 2 located east side of Falls Creek Development. In our workshop, we discussed this will be the second postponement and continuance of this application. So if you're here for the PDP 2020-41, the Villages of Fall Creek Amended Master Plan, this is being postponed yet again. This is twice now. So with that being said, keep in mind it can only be postponed 3 times. So next month would be the third and final either postponement or at that point a withdrawal. Correct, Mr. Mifflin or Mr. Perkins?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else, Joe, for postponement or withdrawal?
That's it, just that one item.
Okay.
They're asking, and I did get the written request to postpone for 1 month till the December meeting.
Sounds good. And then having some problems with my computer. There we go. So next on the commission business under E, consent agenda. Looks like a consent agenda. We do have one eligible consent agenda, which would be the FSP 2020-42, the Snowball Trust Track 6 final subdivision plat to subdivide 2 new 5-acre tracts, leaving a remainder of approximately 16 acres located at 4476 Frankfurt Road. With that being said, whoops. Do we have anybody, Matt, and we have a lot of participants this month, so this, it looks like we have a couple hands that are already, if they're here because they want to hear the application or against it or even in favor of it. Looks like I do have a John Talbot and a Kathleen Zazicki, if I pronounce that right, with their hands up. So if they're here, I guess, to hear this application, and let's ask them if they are, then we'll hear it.
Yeah. I unmuted, I'll unmute them one at a time. I unmuted John
Okay.
just now.
Oh, Mr. Talbot,
Yes, this is John Talbot.
are
And
you here against this application or want to hear it?
we are here against the application for the Harbor Village.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll get to that one next. Let's
Thank you.
next lady who's raised her hand, Mrs. Zazicki, if I pronounce that right.
I have a question about the first and second meetings that had to be adjourned or postponed because of the plan that the Village of Falls Creek have designed.
Yes. So when
In the
that's
event-
postponed, we don't discuss anything at the meeting. That would have to wait till next month.
Okay.
We can do, Mrs. Zazicki, and I apologize if I pronounced that right or wrong.
You
should
are
say.
perfect. You're better than my mother
Wow.
was.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You can actually call the planning and zoning office and speak to Joe or Ben Krebs, and they can definitely answer a few questions between now and next month's meeting.
No, my
Um,
question is pretty simple.
Oh.
In the event that we've already postponed number 1 and number 2, what happens in the event that we postpone it? It is postponed a third time. What happens?
Charlie, do you want to answer that as our legal counsel?
After, it can be withdrawn 3 times. After that, if they're not prepared, then it basically it's withdrawn. They've got to refile.
And when they do refile, how long do they have and how many times can it be postponed after that?
Every application is the same.
So they refile, they apply, and they have 3 times that it will be postponed based on the residents of the Village of Falls Creek. Is that correct?
Each time that they postpone each time that they refile, they'll have to
Pay all
spend
the
the money
fees.
to mail send out mailers to all the nearby residents.
Okay, and I am a resident of Falls Creek and did not get any information that was sent, and I am within the 500 feet that would be affected by this proposal that the Smith family wants to build behind my home. This is not something that I just moved from out of state, built a beautiful home, and all of a sudden I don't get any information. And I understand that, oh yeah, there's homes and, duplexes. So I didn't get anything within the 14 days that is required. So how does that fit in with what's going on?
Joe and Ben at the planning and zoning office should have record of who. No, Ben, you're shaking your head. No, don't you all have records of who got mailed?
Yes, we do.
Oh, okay. I thought I seen Ben's head shake. No, I was worried there.
I just don't ever see those records.
Oh, thanks, Ben. You scared me. So the records are there. And definitely Joe can provide the records that supposedly it was in fact mailed out, inclusive of everybody. It's public record. And then, I mean, definitely you should be on that list. And if you're not, there could be an issue there.
Well, there is an issue because I am one of the few homes that are impacted immensely because there's probably 7 or 8 homes that will back up to the proposed homes that they're putting in. But I didn't get anything in the mail saying, oh, this is what we're proposing.
How long have you been there in that home?
5 months.
Oh, so it would have been because the application probably went in about 3 months ago. So which would have
Okay, so I've been here 5 months, so
so you should
why
have got.
wouldn't I have received something?
If I can point out one thing, I don't know exactly how PVA is doing all those things these days, but it used to be, it could take up to 6 months for the record to be complete after a property.
Okay, so I
transfer.
bought the property over a year ago.
Oh, well, never mind then. You should definitely be on the list. What we could do with then is to make sure that we put that in the record so that if in fact it gets to the point where a new application is filed with new notices, that we can check for you next time.
But had I not known what was going on, I would be sitting here a lame duck without any information that there were going to be single family homes and a duplex behind my house. I would not have bought the property had I known that this was going to happen.
Well, and that's why they're in front of us. It's not a guarantee it's going to happen. And that's why we're here today. And of course, unfortunately, it's being postponed. And there's a lot of other people on here. I'm not sure if it's for that or Harbor Village, but usually, again, what's supposed to happen is everybody's supposed to get notified and the ones that are concerned show up. And I agree with you. If you did not get notified and you didn't hear about it, you wouldn't have been here tonight. And that's a problem. So definitely, with Joe, and Joe, you'll be in tomorrow, right?
Yes.
He'll be 8:30 to 4:30 tomorrow at the Planning and Zoning Office. Give him a call and he can look up for you.
Well,
and of course, we'll note it in the minutes tonight.
please let me know that is the developer and Joey and Doug Smith not required to be at this meeting to answer questions that the homeowners have regarding the expansion and building of lots that are sitting behind homes on Falls Creek?
They may not have been here tonight, maybe knowing at Monday's meeting that we said that it was going to be postponed or continued. But generally speaking, the applicants are usually in attendance. Legal counsel a lot of times is in attendance, as well as an engineer or one of their engineers. And
is their engineer or legal counsel available this evening to answer questions?
Well, again, we're postponing it, so we're not even supposed to be discussing it. Really. When it's being postponed or continue, we're not discussing it tonight. And I hate to, that's why it's being postponed. We can't actually technically.
Amanda, FaceTime video.
Oops. So yeah, unfortunately, I mean, if again, it's not for this meeting to answer any questions because we've postponed it or continued it. So we've got to wait till next month. And
you postponed it. Why?
Amanda,
Hey.
FaceTime video.
Ma'am? Yeah,
Yes.
They
Why
asked-
did you
they-
postpone the meeting?
they asked for a postponement to address the staff's concerns with their application. We weren't happy with the information provided in the amended master plan. We asked for additional information. So they asked for time to address our concerns. We can get you their contact information if you want it. I mean, I'll check the mailing list to make sure you're on it. If there's an issue, we'll try and fix it. But I can get you the contact information if you just want to.
Okay. I
Yeah,
have their contact information, but it's my understanding that since 2004, they have not updated their original plans according to the zoning commission, which is why it was postponed in October, and now it's November and it's postponed again. How many times do they have to, update plans that are now 16 years old?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can't get into discussion of the issues with it tonight. That'll, it's been postponed till next month, but raise those. I actually wrote the staff report that you're quoting, so we know the issues. They've updated it. They've changed their plans multiple times. That's why we asked for the amended master plan at this time for the remainder of the property.
I would check back next month, and if it's postponed next month, then it'll be a while before it comes back probably.
Right.
A while as in how long would a while be? 3 months, 6 months, a year?
Charlie, when it gets postponed 3 times and to reapply, is there a certain period they have to wait to reapply?
We haven't had this question in years. It seems like to me there's some discretion as to whether the commission will even hear it if it's refiled, but I would have to go, pull some documents and take a look at that.
Well, and would you please have that information available for next month when we do come back and discuss this?
We will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions back into actually the FSP 2020-42 Snowball Trust Track 6 and 7? Is there anybody on the call? And I'm looking and watching the attendance. Either you can click a hand raise. Matt, if you want to, I don't know if it'd be a good idea. Oh, I see a hand, Mr. Humphreys. Could you unmute Mr. Humphreys? Mr. Humphreys, are you here for the Snowball Trust Track 7?
I am.
Are you the applicant, the attorney, in favor of it, against it, or you just want to hear?
The applicant.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is, I'm looking for somebody who is against you. We
wants to hear it. Yeah.
The reason we're asking is because this is eligible to be a consent agenda. We wouldn't have to go through the whole the whole hearing of the application. So if there's no one beside yourself here that's against it, and not that you're against it, you're the applicant, but if there's no one here against this applicant or application or would like to hear it, then it's consent eligible. All right. With that,
long enough.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Do you think we've given it long enough to?
Yeah, I'd say maybe wait a couple seconds. Charlie, in the meantime, do we want to maybe swear everybody in real quick? You think that'd be a good idea, or should I wait?
We usually swear them in as they come up because otherwise we don't necessarily have everybody hearing.
True, there may be somebody who joins late.
Yeah.
Like then we've given, I think, enough time for everybody. I don't see any more hands being raised. So I would need a motion then to approve FSP 2020-42 Snowball Trust Track 6 and 7 Final Subdivision Plat, subdivide 2 5-acre tracts, leaving a remainder of approximately 16 acres located at 4476 Frankfurt Road, US Highway 46 or 460.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mrs. Mizell. All in favor, say aye.
All the 4 conditions as well.
Correct, with all the conditions that were listed. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, passes consent. And then at this point, I guess old business was postponed. New business A was consent approved. We'll move right into new business B, PSP 2020-43 Harbor Village Phase 4.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, real quick, if I can interrupt one more time.
Yes, sir.
The applicant on the last one that was approved by consent, have they signed the statement of conditions? Because that has not come to my office, so they need to come to P&Z and sign that, and it needs to get to me, and I need to sign it.
Okay, so Mr. Humphreys, that was for yourself, if you heard that. You have to go to planning and zoning to sign the paperwork. And then, of course, Charlie Perkins will sign it afterwards. Okay, Matt, did you unmute him or hopefully?
Yeah, no, well, I remuted him earlier.
All right. All right. Thank you, Charlie.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so PSP 2020-43 Harbor Village Phase 4 Preliminary Subdivision Plat for Harbor Village Phase 4 located west side of US 25 Cincinnati Pike at Rogers Gap Road. Go ahead.
Okay. This is a request for preliminary subdivision plat approval for an 87 lot subdivision. This is phase 4 of Harbor Village. Harbor Village was originally approved. A zone change was approved in a concept plan at that time in 1988. It was originally developed by the developers of Mallard Point. So they were both same developer applicant at the time. So they were kind of mirrored, not mirror, but kind of subdivisions, related, interrelated. It was amended many times over the years. The original master plan, concept plan had 3 lakes, had 200 to 300 lots. I don't have the exact number. Phase 1 was built with the lake that's out there. So the lake was constructed with the first phase of lots. Phase 2 was amended, I think, at least once. I'm not going to go through all the history. I think the applicant's attorney, Mr. Billings, has a PowerPoint that'll go through the history a little more thoroughly. But I guess I'll summarize by saying it was amended many times. The last time in 2012, when the phase 3 remainder went into bankruptcy. There was a buyer of the remainder of phase 3. He came to the Planning Commission and asked to vacate the rest of phase 3, and he wanted to use it just for a large rural residential tract for his family. The Planning Commission voted to vacate phase 3 at that time and amend the master plan. That was appealed by some owners, residents in the subdivision who wanted the lakes to be built as originally planned, or at least they wanted the lake in phase 3 because the phase 2 lake had already been, a plat had already been approved to remove that lake. But that change by the Planning Commission was appealed by the residents, and it was actually upheld. And the change in the master plan to remove that lake was approved and was upheld by the courts. But after that point, after that, I guess that buyer went away, and that is when Flying Dutchman Properties bought the remainder of the property. They came back in 2018 and 19 and submitted an amended master plan to basically bring back the rest of phase 3 and 4 layout to match what was originally approved in the original concept plan, with the removal of the remaining 2 lakes, or the remaining lake, and just plat that area as open space without the construction of the lakes. But the same general layout, the same lot size, and road routing as was originally approved. Planning Commission approved the amended master plan in 18, and in 19 approved phase 3, but asked for continuance or postponement of approval of phase 4 because there was an issue. The main issue that staff raised at that time was the second road connection in the rear of the property, which was shown on the original master plan. So the original approval showed the main entrance off US 25 and a connection in the rear to Mallard Point in the area of Drake Lane in Mallard Point. And I think the main reason for the connection shown at that time was these were kind of twin subdivisions, planned out and intended to be developed together or in conjunction with each other. And at that time and continuing to this day, we want to see at least a minimum amount of road connection and connectivity in the roadway network, so that if there is a blockage of a road or an emergency in a subdivision that blocks access, that there are at least multiple entrances to these large subdivisions. So it's just a general planning principle. It was carried through in the original concept plan to provide some connection in the back for connectivity and emergency purposes. So I guess to summarize, that was the main issue at the time of Planning Commission heard the request for approval of phase 3 and phase 4. It wasn't resolved at that time because one, there was no road right of way in place. Two, there was a change in ownership that was going through at that time with the property on the Mallard Point side. So the Wilhoites were purchasing that property, and I guess the closing hadn't happened at that point. So Planning Commission deferred approval of phase 4. So today we're reviewing that phase 4 is back, has the same general layout as we saw previously, 87 lots with no lake, but 2 HOA lots in the area of the drainage, the natural drainage courses. All the lots meet the minimum lot size and width of the R1C district and generally follow what was shown on the concept plan. There are 3 issues with meeting the requirements of our subregs. One is the length of these roads. Typically, we require multiple road intersections, just one for connectivity and two to allow for multiple ways in and out and emergency access to the lots, and to just provide better planning, adherence to planning principles that we have in our subregs. So if approved, you will have to approve a variance to the length of the blocks greater than 1,200 feet. Typically, we require a shorter block in the city, but we allow a block length of up to 1,200 feet in the county. So you'll have to approve a variance to the length of the blocks. This subdivision was built with kind of a hybrid road profile. It does have an urban residential zoning, and the lot sizes are much smaller than are typically allowed in the county, but this was approved kind of prior to our cluster regs, and at a time when this area, Mallard Point and Harbor Village, were planned to be part of its own kind of urban service area. So these lots are smaller than typically we'd see in the county. So you will also have to approve a variance to the road section. So it's a 24-foot wide paved road with shoulders and ditches in a 60-foot right-of-way. That our standard county road profile is at 20-foot pavement width in a 50-foot right-of-way, and our urban road section is a 26-foot road with curb and gutter. So this is kind of a hybrid of those two. So in order to continue the road that was built in the previous sections, you'll have to approve a variance also to the proposed road section, which I think we'd be in support of. The third variance is the secondary entrance. We would recommend a full secondary entrance. So in my staff report, I recommended denial unless the easement is obtained. I think at workshop, we talked about that a little bit. That might be kind of unfeasible to deny it without giving the applicant at least the time to work out the easement acquisition. So I've kind of amended it in my recommended conditions. I've recommended approval with the 2 variances to lot length of block and road profile, but I'm recommending denial of the variance to provide only 1 entrance. And then in the conditions, I'm saying condition number 2, instead of an emergency access, I'm recommending that condition number 2 be a full access be provided 24 foot wide road in a standard right of way. And the applicants are still asking for emergency, a gated entrance at the back for the second entrance. So if you do recommend approval, I would suggest you grant reasons for that are particular to this property for granting the variance to the second entrance, and you spell out exactly what in the conditions what the second entrance will look like, either the width of the road and the pavement structure, or you can recommend it meets just the fire department standards and the planning commission engineer standards for emergency entrance. But in order to clarify what staff recommendation is, it is to recommend denial of an emergency second entrance, and we are requesting a full width second entrance. But we are okay with recommending conditional approval, subject to them getting that easement for a full entrance.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Joe a question?
Yes, sir.
Just to make sure, I think I'm pretty sure I understand, but just to make sure we all do. So you have 2 recommendations. If it's to be emergency only, the recommendation is denial. If it's to be a 2-way street to the same standards, it's to be approval, but that's one of your conditions, along with 2 variances.
Yeah, correct. That would be staff's recommendation.
Okay.
Joe, I actually took it a little differently. I took it as you're approving it with a second entrance. Recommended approval would, based on staff, would be if it were a full-blown second entrance. Now, if we decided we wanted to approve it as an emergency exit or entrance only, then you want to document it why we approve that. And otherwise, if we wanted to not allow or approve it without an entrance or exit, then you would totally recommend denying it, period.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, that's how I understood Charlie.
Wait, me and Charlie, yes. Which one is it?
I would recommend, if there was no entrance at all, definitely I would recommend denial of a subdivision of this size with only 1 entrance. If you want to approve a waiver to allow an emergency second entrance, my request is that you spell out exactly why the reasoning, the justification for making that recommending of approval for the waiver, and then spell out in the conditions exactly what the emergency entrance I guess the design and construction details of it.
That makes sense. Do we all agree, Charlie?
Actually, I think what you said is what I said, with the exception of documented if you decide to approve it with the emergency entrance. I didn't add that part, but yes, I think that's all consistent.
Sounds good. All right. Anybody have any questions for Joe from the commission? Do the commissioners have any questions for Joe? Otherwise, we will open it up to the applicant. And I think that would be Attorney Billings, and I'm sure he's on here. There he is. The floor is yours, Attorney Billings.
All right, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. And if
Okay.
you're in control of anything, just let us know. Matt can access or give you access or.
I think, just to make sure, I'm only on audio tonight. I'm not on video, correct?
Oh, okay. Yep, I'm just seeing BLF, so your logo, and I do not see you in your pajamas. So you're.
Well, I'm at the office, I'm not in pajamas, but I just wanted to make sure that I had the right connections. Okay. And
We can hear you.
I think Mr. Summers already has my PowerPoint presentation to show up there. So I'll just sort of say next slide when we get there. And there's some supplemental information as well. So, all right. Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, my name is Nathan Billings. I'm an attorney at Billings Law Firm. I met several of you on Monday night, and I've been before you all a number of times before on this and other projects up in Scott County. It's my pleasure to represent Flying Dutchman with respect to phase 4 of Harbor Village. Matt, if you can go to the next slide. Joe sort of covered some of the background, and if you recall, I was initially before you on this project or this development in the fall of 2018. It sort of seems like every year, about October, November, I come back about a year apart, and we were there originally for phase 3 approval. At that time, I had a pretty detailed background regarding Harbor Village, and I'm not going to go into that same level of detail that I did the first year or even last year. I'm sort of trying to abbreviate it every year, but I recognize there are some new commission members who may not have that full context. As Joe sort of highlighted, and thankfully, Joe recognized that I was going to sort of do this. This development relates back to the late 1980s when the original Harbor Village master plan and zone change was approved, essentially taking 273 acres and rezoning it to an R1C, an R3, and recreational areas, primarily lakes. No R3 has ever actually been approved or constructed, although it is from the original zone change. And it is all sort of in the northeast corner, directly off of Cincinnati Pike. It was contemplated by that time that the R1C area, the single family lots, would have up to 354 residential lots. And that year, the first 119 lots or so was approved in phase 1. Next slide. Skipping ahead to sort of different phases. In 2002, phase 2 was approved. It had 35 lots. It was amended a couple of times to allow for additional lots for a total of 85 lots in 2004. I'm going to come back to that master plan in a minute. And the amended master plan showed a total of 319 lots with 133 lots in phases 3 and 4. Next slide. This was the 2004 master plan that was approved. And I'll come back to this depiction in a minute, but we talked about this on Monday at the workshop. This essentially laid out remaining part of phase 2 as well as future phase 3, 4. And the development didn't develop exactly like this showed, and there's been a couple of changes in the process, but it's largely consistent that one road connects from phases 1 and 2 in the front along the south side of the property. It was to cross a lake, which was removed in 2012, to the what I call the back side or the western side of the property with, if you look in the northwest corner of the site, is a dashed line on both the Mallard Point side and a dashed line on the Harbor Village side showing a proposed connection. Next slide. In 2005, phase 3 was initially filed, but in phase 2, certain lots weren't developed. Again, I'm not going to go into all the detail of how that played out. There was a pedestrian trail to be added within phases 2 and 3. Next slide. In 2000, oh, sorry, go back one. There we go. In 2012, as Mr. Kane referenced, an application was filed for an amended master plan and preliminary plat for phase 3, unit 1. It reduced the number of lots in the phase 3 from 42 residential lots to one single family lot, and it eliminated lake number 3 in that phase. There was an appeal from that decision. The Planning Commission was upheld in its approval of that amended plan. there is the minutes from that meeting show the approval of the preliminary plat that was appealed. And I'm going to come back and show this, the amended master plan in 2012, but no official action under the Scott County regulations, either the zoning ordinance or the subdivision regs, is required for master plans. I guess you could take action, but they don't provide expressly for an amended master plan or any master plans. It's really a concept that shows a proposed or intended development, but until a preliminary plat is approved, the master plan is just here's what we think should happen, or here's what is likely to happen, but it's not a technically legal document or technically legal approvals. The reason I tell you that is in 2012, the connection between Harbor Village and Mallard Point was removed in that master plan, which I'll get to in a second. My clients then purchased the property in 2018, and in October of 18, that was the first time we made a presentation. That plan was approved. Next slide, please. A year later, we followed up with a proposed master plan being amended for phases 3 and 4, an amended preliminary subdivision plat for phase 3, and an initial preliminary subdivision plat for phase 4. The amended preliminary subdivision plat for phase 3 was approved, and construction's proceeding out there. I'm sure been working out there with the engineering team. Roads are in, sewers are in, it's coming along nicely. And one of the things that phase 3 amendment did is it changed the connection from phase 3 into phase 4 based on some topography and some slopes to be better access roads, I think. Phase 4, because of some of the staff's concerns, which included the access to Mallard Point, it included some slopes of driveways, and included a retaining wall issue between the property to the west of phase 4. Phase 4 was withdrawn at that time. And so we had a draft master plan for phase 4, but again, no action needed to take place on the master plan. If you all recall, the first year, 2018, there was, I think, a fairly good showing from the Homeowners Association. By the time we got to last year with the amended plan, it wasn't really significant. I think there were a handful of people who were there, but there were no, what I would call is big objections to what was going on. Next slide. So this is the amended master plan that was submitted last year. The current phase 4 preliminary subdivision plat is generally consistent with this. There's some minor changes, one of which being the proposed connection to the Mallard Point has been shifted to the bottom of this, which is technically to the east, in order to align existing easement that's a private homeowner easement I'm going to talk about in a second. Generally, it's pretty consistent with this master plan filed last year, though. Next slide. So this was the location from last year. Next slide. And this is what's proposed this year. You'll see how the connection into the Mallard Point area has been shifted down a little bit. There is a single connection between phase 3 and phase 4. Otherwise, and staff may want to comment more, but it's generally consistent with a couple of small, what I would call technical changes. Generally, it has the same size HOA lots, the same size location of streets and housing. It has the same type of drainage areas, same lot sizes, same density. It hasn't changed materially, only to update the plan to make sure that technical specifications are being met. And to address some of staff's concerns with respect to the retaining wall, slopes of driveways, and the big issue here, of course, the 800-pound gorilla we're discussing, the access to Mallard Point. Next slide. Phase 4 is that it proposes 87 single-family lots. The average acre size is 0.36 out there, which is it meets or exceeds what is allowed in the R1C. The average lot frontage is nearly 100 feet wide. It's a 98-foot lot, so the good size. You'll have 2 HOA lots that will contain just under 3.5 acres of common area. There's a stormwater maintenance area to be maintained by the HOA, not the county. And it proposes the emergency access to or from Drake Lane. Now, I'm talking tonight based upon a staff's suggestion that if you were to approve it without a permanent easement or a permanent right-of-way, which I'll deal with in a second, we're proposing that the emergency access be given, but by doing that, if it can't be obtained for some reason, I'm not waiving arguments that it's not, I'm not waiving any arguments that says the planning commission couldn't approve it or shouldn't approve it without any second entrance like this. But for the purposes of the hearing tonight, we're saying, look, staff has suggested this as I'll call it the backup recommendation. We have a neighboring property owner who has expressed a willingness to talk to us about that emergency access easement. So for purposes of this application and hearing, we're saying we're not trying to fight to say approve it with only one entrance. Let's sort of meet what staff is saying on if you're going to approve it, at least require emergency access. So I sort of don't want anybody, if we have to come back saying, well, Mr. Billings, you said before, I sort of want to reserve those rights as attorneys are want to do. Next slide, please. 2004 master plan had 319 lots. We have 87 lots. There's 236 buildable lots right now in phases 1, 2, and 3. And phases 1 and 2 are a little bit weird because there's actually 197 lots, but only 194 are buildable. They actually created 2 lots or 3 lots that can't be built upon because of their sizing. And we had 42 lots in phase 3. Next slide. So we have up to 119 lots. We're seeking 87 lots. That actually means that we will not maximize the density that's permitted or that was originally approved in Harbor Village. By the way, Harbor Village has been approved in phases 1 and phase 2, and what we're going to do to complete phase 3 and phase 4. It's not exactly, but it's about 10% deduction in the overall density that was originally suggested. And we think that should at least merit some consideration to show that we have tried to accommodate good lot sizes and street layouts that's not packing in the total number of lots that could potentially be built. Next slide, please. So staff, and I apologize, Mr. Kane, I didn't have your revised staff report, so I've gone off the one that was available on Monday. Staff basically, and you could say this one of several ways, but I think it's the same import. They want to not approve the preliminary subdivision plan until a permanent road connection or permanent right-of-way is obtained to and from Drake Lane and Mallard Point. And I know there was a discussion earlier where Mr. Perkins was asking for clarification, and Chairman, you were asking for clarification. I think regardless of how you phrase it, the bottom line is staff's first recommendation or first desire is to have a permanent right-of-way, regardless of whether you phrase it as disapproval unless, or you phrase it as approval, but only if. Either way, it's the same legal result. Staff desires a full, legally dedicated right-of-way between Mallard Point and Harbor Village. And we understand why they say that. We respect their recommendation, but we do disagree with it for a couple of reasons. Next slide, please. Actually, if you can go back real quick. Primarily, and this is key here, this is not feasible or practical because the Planning Commission and the county have never required that right-of-way to be dedicated or reserved in any prior plats on the Mallard Point side of this. Inside of Harbor Village, we can only control what's in this development. And what staff is asking for is for us to create a right-of-way in a different development on a different piece of property over which we have no control or inputs. While we will work and have worked in good faith to try to accommodate that, the key word here is feasible, and I'm gonna come back to that why in a minute. Next slide, please. Staff then said that basically, if you were gonna approve it, then it should be subject to 3 variances. And we've agreed for purposes of this hearing to all 3 variances. Next slide. Mr. Summers, by the way, thank you. You're doing a great job keeping up with me, so I appreciate it. The 3 variances were allow a roadway width of 24-foot pavement and the 60-foot right-of-way to match the existing Harbor Village Drive road profile. Staff has recommended approval of that for the variance. We agree with that request, and we've made the request for the variance. The Planning Commission did the same thing for phase 3 and for the other roads in Harbor Village phases 1 and 2. It's really just to make sure that the road connections are consistent throughout. We agree. I'm going to skip to the 3rd one, which is a block length of greater than 1,200 feet. The long circular driver on the backside of the property is longer than that. There's a geographic reason why it needs to be that way. But because really, if you look at that road, about half of it is neighboring the adjacent parcel and doesn't have roads on it, we think the variance is appropriate here. And we would agree with staff's recommendation that that variance should be granted. And finally, I'll turn back to the second variance request, which is the subdivision exceeding 200 single family lots of a single entrance the variance. I think staff believes that you can do that, but that staff wants to have, again, the full right-of-way connection. We agree that a variance might be needed, but I'm going to come and talk to you about what the actual regulation says in a minute and show you why I don't know that you have to give a variance, but if one is required, you can legally grant it. Next slide, please. The staff then makes a number of conditions in the report, except for 2, which is number 2, which I'm going to discuss at length, and number 6. We agree with all of staff recommendations. They're the boilerplate template conditions. We don't have a problem with any of them. Of note, though, I'll note number 2 is the condition that staff said applicant shall provide a gate accessible by emergency services at the rear property boundary and a hard surface access road connection to Drake Lane approved by the county fire department. We agree with that condition, and we have a letter of approval from the county fire department now that we've gotten since Monday. But I understand this is not staff's primary recommendation or the one that they would most like to see. But we do agree that it is an appropriate condition for purposes of this application, that it should be a condition to the approval. The other one is note 6, which was the creation of an HOA, and staff's note carried over. It should be made part of the existing Harbor Village HOA. We discussed this both at workshop, but also in the phase 3 approval in 2018. And our position here is we're going to have an HOA. We have no problem with that. There is a legal issue in submitting phase 3 or now phase 4 into Harbor Village because their documents might have to be legally amended to do that, which would require a vote of their owners. And that HOA would then have to assume the maintenance cost and obligation for the common areas in phases 3 and 4. That HOA has talked with the applicant's principals several times the last couple of years. No agreement has been reached. There's been no disagreement either. So I would tell you, we would just ask that you all require there to be a homeowners association documents for the ownership and maintenance of any common areas, but strike the last sentence of condition 6. In other words, don't require it to be part of Harbor Village HOA because it might be a legal impossibility or the parties might not want that to occur. And we would hate for that condition to then become a bump in the road for that. Next slide, please. The remaining conditions 7 to 12 we agree with, so I don't think there's any issue there. So let's come and deal with the 800-pound gorilla. Next slide, please. All right, condition 2. So in here, you'll see this deals with this connection issue. And in fairness to staff, when we came back with an amended preliminary subdivision plat in phase 3, staff wrote in its report that we have approval of construction plans and control of right-of-way for off-site road connection to Mallard Point shall be required prior to approval of phase 4 construction plans, phase 4 discussion item. That was from staff's thing. Based upon that discussion item, we agreed to withdraw phase 4 last year. And at that point, there wasn't, staff didn't need to make a position because we withdrew it, but there was not a requirement set forth that we had to have a full right-of-way. It did talk about control of a right-of-way for off-site, but it didn't talk about the technical side of that. At the same time this was going on last year, the neighboring property, which was owned by a Wilhoite limited partnership, was transferring a parcel, which I'll show you where it is in a second, to 2 sons of partners in that. I believe their names are Joe and Jamie Wilhoite. And staff approved a development subdivision plat for that property, which effectively eradicated and terminated any possibility for there to be a dedicated right-of-way between Harbor Village Phase 4 and Mallard Point. Now, I worked, I would say, extensively with staff and with Charlie or Mr. Perkins last year at this time. We reached out to the Wilhoites, and at that time, they didn't have a desire to give us a right-of-way. Staff approved that plat and it was filed of record. And I think staff arguably was correct in approving that because the applicant, the Wilhoites, met all of the technical specifications for a minor subdivision plat. And because the Planning Commission and the county had not, before that time, created a legal mechanism to dedicate or to reserve that 50-foot right-of-way, staff was going to either have to disapprove that subdivision plan, which would mean violating the subdivision regs. And so I think they were correct, or they approve it, but they remove any ability, any physical ability to get that right-of-way dedicated. And so that was happening coterminously with the Phase 3 amended preliminary subdivision plat in the fall of 2019. Right, next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to go back in time a little bit, and you'll see on your screens here that 2004 master plan was actually filed for both Mallard Point and for Harbor Village. And you can see the size differences. I mean, Mallard Point is about 6 times the size or 7 times the size of Harbor Village. But where the red arrow is pointed, it shows the connection boundary line between those two developments. Next slide, please. Here's the close-up of that. And you'll see at that time, there was a suggested area of it's a dashed line here because those lots had not been platted in either Mallard Point or in Harbor Village. So it's a dashed line to show a future proposed right-of-way. Next slide, please. And with that master plan, there was also a master plan for Harbor Village. And this is the close-up of it. So you can see this is a little bit less granular. You can see that in a little more detail. Again, dashed lines show things that were not quite approved, but were being suggested as in the future. With full transparency, we recognize that plan, this master plan was out there. We recognize what that master plan proposed. Next slide, please. However, in 2012, which Mr. Kane told you about a second ago, the owner of the property at that time, or I think is actually a purchaser of the property at that time, came forward and proposed changing all of the lots in Phase 3 and instead putting one single family on it and getting rid of a lake and removing the access by the master plan from Phase 4 into Mallard Point. And I think in fairness to staff's point would be, well, that was shown as being removed because you were also removing the 30 or so houses in Phase 3. And I think that's a fair point. But I do want to point out that in 2012, this master plan was submitted to the Planning Commission. I could not find any reference that the Planning Commission took action on the amended master plan because I don't think the subdivision regs actually require action, but it did not have connectivity. But the Planning Commission did approve that amended subdivision plat for Phase 3, which ultimately went up on appeal, and ultimately your all's decision in that regard was upheld. It's my belief that if you approved the 2012 preliminary subdivision plat, you were implicitly or tacitly acknowledging the changes to the Phase 4 connectivity. There's no holding, there's no finding, so I'm acknowledging that. But at least the most recent master plan before what we're doing does not show that connectivity. Next slide, please. So as I was telling you a few minutes ago, in 2019, the Wilhoites, which is the property directly north of us, is a large parcel owned by a Wilhoite family partnership, and it was subdividing this tract, this small tract, which essentially runs the northern boundary of Phase 4 between Phase 4 and Mallard Point. And it took this parcel and subdivided it into 2 tracts. And I don't have the advantage of Mr. Summers using the PowerPoint here, but if you look at this, there's a center lot called Parcel 1. Thank you, Matt. And the problem is that where Parcel 1 is, that elevation change is probably 40 or 50 feet from the location of Drake Lane to the top of Parcel 1. To build a driveway that goes straight up that is either 1, not smart, or 2, not good engineering practices. So instead, the 2 brothers who are acquiring this from their, I think it's their uncles or their fathers, the larger family partnership, what they did is you'll see Parcel 2 has sort of a hook that comes around the backside of Parcel 1 in a clockwise direction off of Drake Lane to parcel 2. And what they did was create a 25-foot private, not public, private access easement in that in that clockwise fashion that allows lot 1 or parcel 1 to create a driveway in that hook, call it, or the L, the backwards L, to reach the top of parcel 1, as well as the back of parcel 2. So essentially, parcel 1 and parcel 2 are brothers, and they now share a driveway. That driveway is constructed of gravel today. The Mallard Point HOA rules require that driveway to be constructed of concrete. So they have to, at some point, complete that to be made of concrete. And I know that that's a discussion ongoing. We don't have any beef or fight with it. It's just letting you know technically what's going on. But there already is a 25-foot private easement there. When staff approved this minor subdivision plat last year, what that did is it made it physically impossible for Harbor Village to ever connect with a right-of-way to Drake Lane. And that's key for what I'm going to tell you in a second. Again, staff, I think, was correct in approving the minor subdivision plat last year because the Wilhoites met the technical specifications of a subdivision plat. But because that right-of-way had never been dedicated or deeded or reserved on the Mallard Point side of this, staff was left with no ability, and we were certainly, as the applicant, left with no ability to feasibly acquire the dedicated right-of-way that staff is asking for today. Next slide, please. So you'll see here's a close-up to that access easement. You'll see it's 35 foot wide is the private easement. What we are suggesting, and we have had discussions with the Wilhoites that are not finalized, they're not written down, they're not signed off on, but that we use that 35-foot access easement and the 10-foot driveway that they have to create to create a legal emergency access easement over their existing easement and driveway that doesn't inconvenience them except in emergencies. We would have to pay them for that. So there's some consideration that we would have to pay, not the Planning Commission, for the right to access that. Next slide, please. So this sort of summarizes what I've told you about what happened. What I want to do now is, and I don't have a slide on this, and I apologize, I probably should have, but staff has referenced what the subdivision regs require. And if you all, I don't know if you all have copies of them, but Article 10 of the subdivision regs, Section 1000P, subsection 7 provides, here's the legal standard. Single family developments of 200 or more units and multifamily developments of 100 or more units shall have at least 2 entrance intersections, comma, this is the key language, where physically feasible. So I believe staff is correct that it does say that when you have more than 200 single family lots, you're supposed to have more than 1 entrance. The staff report does not detail that clause where physically feasible. To me, that means you don't have to have a variance for this request. If it is no longer physically feasible for reasons that are outside of the applicant's control, I believe the commission can make a finding that it's not physically feasible that would justify 1 entrance without emergency access. But for purposes of today and where we are, I believe that staff's recommendation of having the second entrance for emergency access is a better result and better practice for both neighborhoods in this case, including all of the people in the front of Harbor Village should something happen on the main road near Cincinnati Pike and emergency vehicles have to come through this, or conversely, for all of the owners in Mallard Point, should something unfortunate happen at its entrance. It is better for both versus this not being approved and phase 4 not being developed and you have no secondary emergency access to either developments at all in that case. In addition, there are at least 4 other developments that I'm aware of, and Thoroughbred Engineering has helped me identify, that have more than 200 single-family units and or more than 100 multifamily units with only one entrance. These include Mallard Point, which is right next door. It only has one technical legal entrance right now. 2, Pleasant Valley. While about a year and a half ago, Pleasant Valley approved the Pleasant Valley condos in phase 3, which I represent that developer, there were over 200 single-family lots in Pleasant Valley that were approved with a future proposed connection, but it had never been built. Number 3, Elkhorn Meadows. That has multifamily and duplexes mixed with single family. The total density there is, I believe, over 300. And number 4, you have Victoria Estates. Victoria Estates has one road in and out in the front. It does now have an access road off the back of the gas station parcel, but it is not a primary road. It is only limited access, which is exactly what's being suggested here. Otherwise, Victoria Estates is almost exactly what we have here. It's one way in and one way out. Next slide, please. So here is what we have suggested on our plan. Now, we cannot create an easement on the Wilhoite property by our preliminary subdivision plat. What we can technically show you is our lots and our roadways on Harbor Village Phase 4, which you'll see is enclosed on the left side of this snapshot inside of the heavy dotted line. You'll see the emergency access note that with an arrow to point where the gate to be located. And then you have a lightly shaded line that would show the proposed or a potential route of that easement. To create that easement, we will have to have a written legal agreement with the Wilhoites. It will have to be filed in the county clerk's office, just like you would a deed or a plat. And it would describe the exact location of that easement to be accessed between Drake Lane and Harbor Village Phase 4. So that light colored line on the Drake Lane side is only a as proposed, because we can't legally, by this application, require another property owner to do or give us something. Next slide, please. In regard, we talked on Monday at the commission workshop about fire department approval. At that point, we had talked to them and we had sort of a verbal understanding. We were able to get a letter from them dated yesterday to Daniel Rayner at Thoroughbred. He is our engineer. He is also on the Zoom call and available. Daniel has given him a proposed outlay of an easement and the construction of it. And he has said that they would approve it for emergency access. He's okay with a 10-foot wide road as long as it remains unobstructed and undeveloped. And so what he means is we can't put anything to obstruct there except a fire gate with a chain that would be cut that says emergency access only. In other words, we can't put a mechanized gate up there that would prohibit a fire truck or ambulance or something like that from going through there. But a pair of bolt cutters would take it off and you could go through that in emergency. And then you could put the gate back very quickly after the emergency is over. So it doesn't require damage to anybody's property, and it could be immediately restored as a gate prohibiting public access very quickly once the emergency was over. Next slide, please. So I want to reserve my rights in case we're not able to finalize that easement. But at this point, the Wilhoites and the principals of Flying Dutchman have talked numerous times. Their discussion, I think, is productive. I've not talked to them directly yet, but I've talked to the Flying Dutchman principals multiple times about their discussions and negotiations. Because the Wilhoites have indicated a willingness to work with Flying Dutchman as the applicant, we agree with the staff's, what I'll call their secondary report, which is approve this development as proposed, but do require the emergency access easement and gate inside of here. We think that the commission can make findings that the second entrance is not physically feasible, Mallard Point side, because the county and the commission did not previously create or dedicate a right-of-way, because the Wilhoites properly sought and got approval of a subdivision plat, which prohibits a dedication of right-of-way today. And 3, there are evidences of other developments in Scott County that have previously been approved and have been constructed with more than 200 single-family units with only one entrance. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Attorney Billings? Okay.
Not at this time.
At this point, I think, Matt or Charlie, I would say we would probably, well, again, that was a long presentation by Attorney Billings. We forgot to swear him in, and then we'll swear each individual person in as they have questions.
Mr. Perkins, I swear or affirm that everything I just said for the last hour was the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. So I think I already have a hand up, it looks like by Mr. Wilhoite. So Matt, are you going to go ahead and unmute people as they raise their hands?
Yes, we'll unmute them one at a time as they raise their hands.
Thank you. So it looks like Mr. Wilhoite.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Wilhoite.
So do I need to swear in?
Yes, you do. Ms. Wilhoite, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm statements you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So I guess I had a few things from that presentation. We have had some discussions with the Flying Dutchman owners directly, but we have not reached an agreement yet. And we really were looking for more information on the requirements of the roadway. So that's good to see about the 10-foot requirement, that the fire chief is okay with that. I guess one major question I have is if we do grant an emergency access only easement, and that's the extent of it, what assurances would we have that the emergency access easement would never become a permanent access road?
So I think the way we'll do this, and usually what we do when we're in person, is the people ask their questions, and I would ask that Mr. Billings take notes and write all the questions down, and then he'll turn around and answer them all in one swoop. So what we'll do then for you, Mr. Wilhoite, is take that question. I'll ask that Mr. Billings write that down, and I'll try to do the same. And then, are there any other questions you have? And then we'll again continue.
Mark, that might be more a question for planning and zoning.
Okay.
With eminent domain already been seeked once on this property since we've obtained it, that basically that won't happen again.
I guess we could answer that one. Joe, would you want to answer that one now then? And then we can kind of continue on question by question.
Sure. If you did approve an emergency access, if that were to be changed, it would have to come back through Planning Commission. Planning Commission would have to approve a full entrance. We'd need a plat dedicating right of way, so that would have to come through the Planning Commission. So I think you would have to take official action to make that change, and there would have to be notice sent out, and there would have to be a hearing.
It would also have to be an application that bears the consent of the Wilhoite owners. Because as Mr. Billings stated earlier, he can't make an application for something on their property. So when they entered whatever kind of agreement they had, they would describe whatever it was they were granting. And if that's an emergency exit or entrance exit only, gives the specifics. We couldn't change that unless the Wilhoites joined in an application to make it something else. So once that was done, I mean, the Wilhoites basically have what they've agreed to, and it could not be extended.
Thank you, Charlie. I guess a follow-up question on that. In the event that the county eventually takes over these roads, which I think is the plan, will that still be the case that that basically we would have control over what that access ever becomes?
I believe the only way that, well, first off, the county generally takes over roads only that meet county spec. Being an emergency only, this won't do that. Doesn't mean they can't vote to do that, but they would then have to come in, at least it's my understanding, they would have to come in and condemn the property on either side of it to make it, if they wanted it something more than just that emergency access.
Right.
That's just not something they generally do.
I understand.
But the county always has the authority, if it's a public need, to come in and condemn property, pay for whatever is either negotiated or a court orders, and then, you know, they could build what they need to build. That just seems like a very unlikely scenario.
And I think on the other hand, and Mr. Wilhoite, I don't think you were at the workshop on Monday. We talked about this briefly. If the road in fact did go through, or if this was approved as a full-blown thoroughway between the two subdivisions, and it would meet, you know, the requirements that it could be then dedicated to the county, and the county would take care of that road once it's built. Correct, Charlie?
Yes, but the county would have to approve its dedication.
Correct.
Unlike in the city, if it's built to their spec, it's theirs. In the county, whatever it's built to, they have the discretion to say yay or nay.
I knew we talked a little bit about that Monday, so I just want to make that clear for
Yes,
Mr. Wilhoite.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Wilhoite?
Yeah, that's just a few other statements. So it was said that we only have a gravel drive right now, but the requirement from Mallard Point is pavement. We have discussed with the homeowners association, and once construction is complete, we will be making a pavement drive. So everyone's aware of that. And that Mallard Point does have a secondary emergency access at the end of Wood Duck. But that's just I just want to be, you know, there's a few things I saw that I just want to be sure everybody's clear on.
You know what, while I've got you here, Mr. Wilhoite, I guess if you don't mind me asking you a question, because the thought was, or at least what I felt like I heard on Monday at the workshop, was that it seemed like the commission was leaning towards wanting to have this a full-blown through road from Mallard Point to Harbor Village and so is that potentially something that could come upon and be agreed upon between yourself and the applicant?
We would have serious reservations with that just because of the proximity to our house and the fact that it would cut in between our house and the rest of our family-owned farm.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Wilhoite, for answering that. Any other questions? I guess looks like we still have 17 or 18 people in the audience. I've got some hands there. I don't know, Matt, if you can see who raised their hand first, but if you don't mind muting, it looks like you unmuted. Did you, John Talbot?
Good evening. This is John Talbot. I'm here with, I don't know how we can show this, but I'm here with Bruce Coons, the president of Mallard Point Owners Association, and Mark Smith, the original developer of Mallard Point and Harbor Village. And Mark also serves as the director of Mallard Point.
Would you swear them all in, Charlie?
Yes, sir. Mr. Talbot, Coons, and Smith, would you all raise your right hands? And do you swear or affirm the statement you're to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, I do. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And before you answer any questions, you are safely 6 foot apart, right?
Pretty close, pretty close.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
That's right.
So go ahead.
Okay, so I guess and Bob, I want to make a presentation, but in this kind of preliminary stage, I'd like to ask the question that of Mr. Billings, if he could come back to this, is when he obtained the letter from the fire department, was the fire department aware that the emergency entrance will be across a driveway shared by 2 residences?
Now, Charlie, how should we do this? Should we just answer each question as it comes up, or do you want Mr. Billings to write all these questions down and answer them at the very end? or the feeling of Joe, the commission. I don't care. However you want to do it, I'm definitely open. Charlie, maybe you just.
I would probably suggest we answer them as each comes up.
Okay.
That way we're clear on what the questions are. We're clear on what we're seeking to answer. Otherwise, we could possibly get bogged down on just what were the questions and.
Right. Okay, well then, Matt, you've got a little more to your job as now you'll have to unmute Nathan Billing. Or did you want to go through a bunch of questions, Mr. Talbot, or you want to do one at a time?
Let's just do one at a time. I think that'd be a little clearer for everybody.
That's fine. Mr. Billings?
Sure. So make sure I understand is that if he's able to cross-examine me, I'm able to cross-examine him. Is that correct, Mr. Perkins?
I think that's always correct, Mr. Billings.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Talbot, I appreciate your question. I don't know the answer to that. I have not spoken directly to the fire department. Daniel Rayner, the engineer who was working with the fire department and all the technical specifications that they wanted to be approved, talked and worked with them. He's on the call, I believe, so he may be able to answer if he knows what the fire department knows. I would be hard pressed to believe that he could tell you what they know or don't know, but he's the one who will have to say if he's asked that exact question and they've told him that exact answer. I do know that the fire department is aware of the house. I'm sorry?
Somebody spoke and I couldn't hear who it was.
Oh, I thought Mr. Talbot was asking a follow-up.
No.
They're aware that there are 2 residential lots here that this driveway accesses. Including the one at the top of the hill that Mr. Wilhoite owns, and that Mallard Point is a residential subdivision with houses all along Drake Lane, because it's so abundantly clear they couldn't not know that. But whether they know the exact location, I guess, Mr. Rayner, if you're online.
I can speak to that. So I sent them that plat that you actually did, well, it's not a plat, but I sent them that exhibit that you showed in your presentation that showed that proposed access easement through their property. When I talked with both the fire chief, Mike Fuller, and the assistant fire chief, Canavy, and I told them basically there's an existing driveway to the property there, and their only concerns at first when I talked to them was that they thought that they'd have to make that turn and go up that road to the Wilhoite's property. I was like, no, ours is going to follow their driveway and then continue straight into our development. So there will be no turning or having to back up or maneuver around that road. As far as if they're aware specifically how you asked that question, if it connects 2 properties, it doesn't actually cross, the easement doesn't actually cross across 2 properties. It just serves 2 properties as far as the access. I don't know if they specifically, like Nathan Billings said, that I asked that direct question, but I told them when I spoke with them that it was an existing driveway and that it would be used to access the Harbor Village property from Drake Lane to Harbor Village Phase 4.
Mr. Chairman, just to be sure, Mr. Rayner, I don't believe I swore you in earlier. Do you swear or affirm what you've just said and what you're going to say to be the truth, the best for information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, Charlie. Staying on top of that, Charlie. So
and the fire department did go out. He did go out and see the property. So.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. You said you had a couple more questions.
I think that's the extent of the questions. You know, on behalf of Mallard Point, we're in opposition to this, and I don't know when you want us to make our presentation. If you want to go through the audience and see what other people have to say, or questions.
Do you think that? Yeah, that'd probably be fine. I mean, are you going to do a full-blown presentation? And if you are, maybe it might be best that you do your presentation first. And then this way, that may answer a lot of the questions that other residents may have.
Okay.
It could be better, Charlie, if we let all the residents speak and then them do a full-blown presentation. I'm just trying to avoid some repetitiveness.
Yeah, my thought, Mr. Chairman, would be if Mallard Point is going to make a presentation, that might be good for the other members of the public to hear before they get up and make comments. It would maybe clarify some things.
Let's go that route then. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Talbot, if you'd like to do your presentation, go right ahead. If you need some screen sharing, Matt could probably make that happen.
So Matt, the screen I'd like to get would be the slide where you showed both of the developments.
Okay, give me just 1 second.
Thank you.
Is this the screen you were referring to?
No, there's a screen of both Mallard Point and Harbor Village.
Are you looking for the aerial imagery like this, or?
No, there was a master plan that showed them both together.
I think, let me switch presentations. I think that one was actually Mr. Billings' presentation.
Billings, yeah.
Yes, one of the earlier ones.
There it is, right there. That's good, right there. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I'm John Talbot. I'm here on behalf of the Mallard Point Owners Association. I'm here with Mark Smith, the original developer of Mallard Point and Harbor Village, who currently serves as the director of the Mallard Point Association, and Bruce Coons, the current president. Both of them would like an opportunity to speak. And so I'm going to kind of give a brief overview of this and just correct a few things that I think I heard that I don't think didn't match up to my understanding. So in looking at this slide, if you will, and you go back to 1982 when Mark Smith first began developing this, these were two separate subdivisions, and there might have been a tangential connection, but it was just a concept. But over the past 30 years, these two subdivisions have existed entirely separate. They're not co-subdivisions. They're not sister HOAs. If you look through Mallard Point right there, you'll see it has a very large lake. It has extensive playgrounds. It has a couple smaller lakes. It has a very self-contained road system and a very active HOA. And it's existed successfully in the county for 30 years. Our owners are very engaged, I think, as you'll see by their presence here tonight. And they pay significant dues to maintain these lakes and these park areas. And for that, they really value their privacy, their security, and so forth. They think that a connection, any kind of connection with Harbor Village would destroy this, and is certainly not necessary. By any kind of entrance like this, it's very much like the camel getting its nose into the tent. Once a connection is created like this, at first it might be a walking path, then it might be bicycles, then it might be RVs, then it might be some dirt bikes. Next thing you know, you're going to have people all running up and down here. I'm sure the commission's well aware there was a very unfortunate incident in West Wind several years back where a man was killed, over some teenagers hot rodding through the neighborhood. These subdivisions, especially in remote areas like this, tend to get unsupervised and have those kind of problems. And by creating that connection, it will allow that potential to occur here when Mallard Point is a very secure, safe neighborhood in its combined unit that exists today. This proposal that for the phase 4 of Harbor Village is a very dense development for such a rural area. And I was shocked at the number of variances or workarounds that they were getting to be able to have such a dense development with 87 lots, very few amenities. Their only amenity really is a detention basin. If you look at it, they've removed the lake. There's no park area. They're asking you to vary the lot and block length. So the only reason to do that is to allow them to get more lots. If you impose the normal block requirements, then it would be there'd be a better flow through the subdivision, I think. So we're opposed to the subdivision itself just because we think it's too much, too far from where it ought to be. But our real main objection and our real strenuous, which we think is a terrible idea, is to have any form of physical connection between these two. They've existed for 30 years as separate units without any need for any connection, and they function better and safer for their residents. They have separate HOAs. They don't have any sharing of anything. a major concern that Mark is going to talk about will be that, you know, we look at this, once this connection's made, it'll change the watershed. All of a sudden, we're going to have water, you know, storm water flowing from, you know, the Harbor Village down into the Mallard Point Lakes. You know, we don't see the, so I guess I'm going to kind of pause for a second and let Mark kind of pick up from there before I get too deeper into this.
Mark, Chairman, the commissioners, staff, Charlie, appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight. When we originally started this back in 1982, and
We can't hear you, Mark.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, could you get a little closer to the microphone or phone?
Okay.
We can't hear you.
I thank the chairman and commissioners and Charlie and staff for allowing us to talk tonight. Is this better?
Yeah.
Much better. Thank you.
Yes.
And Charlie, since he's much older than I am, he was around prior to us making these presentations to him and was witness and was in the decision-making progress of all of them. So I'm sure that he can look back and recall a lot of this. As we began developing, the original 800 acres went to 1,200 acres, went to 15, and then almost, subsequently and finally up to almost 3,000 acres. The Planning Commission asked for, come in and give us a master plan. What's all this going to look like? We were doing Mallard Point with the 3 lakes that we did in phase 1 and 2, which we put in to be larger, more substantial, higher priced homes. And we found the need when Toyota announced to come in to do Harbor Village, and they were going to be priced at a price point under Mallard Point. You know, now that's not necessarily true, and it's grown. It's become quite substantial on its own. But the staff asked us, and the commission at the time said, show us what all this is going to look like. So thusly, this was developed and, our master plan and shown to, the commission. We were not seeking approval of it. It was not approved, but it let them see what our ideas were moving forward in the future from 1982 as it progressed. This originally was done, I think, back in 1987, 1988, originally. I know it says 2004 on this. But when we did this, we did show a road that would connect them. And we showed it for this reason. All of the property was under one ownership, and that was ours. It would be developed under one concept, which was ours. The roads were private and belonged to us. They're maintained by the Owners Association. If and when we ever decided that we would hook these communities together, there would have always been a permanent barrier between the two. It would have been a gated, just like the entrance of Mallard Point was at the time. It would have been gated. There was never anticipated for it to be a free-flowing roadway. And that was not wanted. The commission did not want us to do it that time because they did not want a thoroughfare created. And I go back to some of these concepts, which may be out of date today, but I'm sure Charlie will remember when we were putting in roadways, we were required by the commission and fiscal court at the time. Mallard Point Drive was 28 feet wide. We were required to build a road 40% wider than the road that was supplying us. US 25 is 20 feet. Our collector roads is 24 feet, which is Drake, Wood Duck, and Greenwing, as was required in Harbor Village Drive, 24 feet wide, and our courts were 22 feet wide. So these were all both different subdivisions that each were approved and have been developed Mallard Point now for 38 years. That's nearly 4 decades with one entrance and 0 problems in 40 years. All right, as far as the security of Mallard Point, we have one entrance. That way we can camera and cover one entrance. If we ever need to see who came in, who left, for what reason, with what, for what purpose, we have that ability today. If the commission was to require us to hook up to another independent community, we would lose that. Harbor Village, on the same point, has gone on for 25 plus years, maybe even probably 30 years now, with one interest successfully without incident. So there is no essential need for these to be connected. Now, I thought Mr. Billings, I've never had the opportunity to meet him, and I'll look forward to what point in time I get to, not necessarily over this, over anything. I thought he did a real good job on his presentation. I agree with 95% of what he said. The point that I do not agree with, and I know the association does not agree with, the board, and I don't speak with all of them, Bruce is here, but John represents us, is these were not mirror communities. These communities had no contact association, period. Never have. And one of the things that was essential, you know, obviously as I developed it all, you know, we were required to have a wastewater utility. We did all that, work with the Division of Water. The dams were the Class C dams that we built, was a primary dam, which meant human hazard. We were required to do water quality. We were required to, one of the things we did when we put all this together, what was important for us as a community, and my vision, here we are almost 40 years later, it's continuing. And this community is much greater than the guy that built it. And that's what you want to do in life. But one of our greatest assets in Mallard Point are our 3 lakes. We have over 500 million gallons of raw water storage, which is a great asset. In Georgetown, we even approved Georgetown to come tap it during the drought. That was 25, 30 years ago, and then it started raining, so that didn't happen. So it was an asset to not only Scott County, but to Georgetown at the time. But what's so very important, and what we put together such a large number of acres for, was so we would control the entire watershed of our community, of what goes into our lakes. Now, if you hook another community to this, and you hook another roadway to this, that we're going to, and I tell you what, prior to any approval, we would ask the commissioners, we would ask the applicants, we would even ask the Wilhoites if they're going to participate in this, and we would ask that you require an environmental impact study of all watershed going from the southern point of Mallard Point, the entire distance that goes to our lakes, because there's drainage from this into Drake Lake drains into Mallard Point Lake, and Mallard Point Lake discharges into an unnamed tributary of Little Eagle Creek. But we would require at a minimum, okay, a full environmental study applicable and with oversight from the Division of Water in Frankfurt of all rainwater runoff impact that we would have in the watershed of our lakes. And I think that ought to be number 1. Now, number 2, I think Mr. Billings made a great point. You all there's been other master plans, and, you know, I was out of these developments in we started in 82, and I was out. We had sold, and, you know, I kept obviously the wastewater utilities and served all of them for 30 some years, but with the development end of it, we were out in 93. And so there's been other subsequent developers, and I heard somebody said, you know, that 2 different people did phase 2 and phase 3 of Harbor Village. There's been actually 3 different owners in the last 36 months of the property in question here that the Wilhoites now own. Mallard Point LLC had them, which is a company out of Michigan, and they sold at auction this property, which was bought by Duncan, who then sold it to, you know, the Wilhoites, and nowhere in any of this changed. And there's actually, I think, 5 or 6 owners in the last, you know, 25 years. And nowhere in there has there been any provision or any requirement by any developer, any subsequent property owner, or number of property owners for any attachment to be made for the, you know, and it's beside me, I guess it's past me would be a better word, how staff can say, well, we're going to require Mr. Billings and these gentlemen to build a road across property they don't own, that they have no control over, and they have no association with, whether those people want to do it or not. And then I think it's going to be important for the Wilhoites and Joe in particular, you heard tonight, said, well, would you actually be against a full-blown roadway? And I'm going to just, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can kind of see light at the end of the tunnel. And if there is a walking path, a bike trail, an emergency access between these two communities, it's going to wind up as a full-blown roadway. And I can't imagine, how that will impact Mallard Point other than in a most negative way. So from the original developer, the original concept, the guy that had this plat done, that is the interpretation of that roadway. If it was ever to be done, it would have been done under common ownership with a private road and fully gated at the time, separating these communities. I'll quit talking and I'll turn it over to Bruce Kuntz, the president of the Owner Association.
I believe that, thank you. Also express my.
Bruce, you closer to the.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you go. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, no problem. Likewise, I express my appreciation to all individuals, staff, commissioners, applicants, and other folks that are on the conference. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. John and Mark have obviously said a lot of things. I fully support them. I want to mirror what Mark has said. When I first learned of this a few weeks ago and started looking into it, the question was this ever approved? And what I'm hearing from Mark, and I think if I understood it correctly from Mr. Billings, such a feature was never approved or sought since the early 80s. And I mirror the question of, like, how can it be required to put something in place that was never provided for multiple owners? The security is a major concern for us. We understand that my concern, and I have expressed this in a question to the planning and zoning earlier today, when I look at the end of the tunnel, I would see very clearly that at some point in time, someone will want to make this a thoroughfare, a public road. And if I were in the Wilhoite's position, or as Mallard Point, I would want a legal document. And Mr. Billings, I absolutely agree with you that this, if something like this is to take place, it must be via a legal document, that it must be designated as a permanent dedicated emergency vehicle with no ability to change it. Now, I understand from Charlie, we don't want an entrance. Okay, I mean, but should it be, that would be the requirement, because I think, as Charlie mentioned, well, it doesn't happen. It could, it doesn't happen. It's very remote, but well, the property could be condemned. If I were in the Wilhoite's shoes, I would say, I don't want to take that chance. As Mallard Point, we would certainly concur and support them in that. I also have a question, and I don't remember it coming up. I think in the staff report, there was also a requirement for an assessment of the impact of the proposed Harbor Village on connecting their sewer line to the Mallard Point system. I have not heard anything, that, in our conversation tonight that is there. I would like to express concern. I know that I don't know where it would be proposed to be linked in. Perhaps Mr. Billings could advise us where that would be. But we do know that there have been issues, particularly even with the Wilhoites, trying to tie in, and that was just a single family at that point. Now we're looking at trying to push into the Mallard Point system somewhere, now another 80 some odd homes. That would be in addition to the previously approved 50 some odd homes that are planned to go in the Pinnacle within Mallard Point. That I think is something that affects, certainly could have a very negative impact on the property values and the health and welfare, not only of the individual property owners, but also perhaps to the lakes as well. So those are my concerns at this point. John?
Mr. Coons, I have a question for any Mr. Talbot or Mr. Smith, whomever may know the answer to this. And I think it was Mr. Smith who had said it about, a lot of units, 85 units on this next phase. Do y'all know the average size of a lot in Mallard?
Yeah, all of the lake lots are a half acre. Now I'm talking about in phases, everything west of Wood Duck. Wood Duck is the first road that goes north and south on this plat. All right. Everything, phase 1, 2, 3, pretty much everything that's on the lake lot is a half acre. Everything off the lake is a full acre. And so it's my understanding that these off lake lots are twice as dense as what Mallard Point's off lake lots are. Now that could change a little bit on 3 streets. The only 3 streets in Mallard Point I did not develop are Blackberry Ridge, Doe Court, and Falcon. And that's everything that lays to the east side of Drake. But I think they're pretty consistent. Everything on lake is a half acre. Everything off lake pretty much is an acre.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm just asking to try to compare that to this, to Harbor Village's phase 4, which it looks like the number of units per net acre is 0.44. So somewhat, different. And then the lot sizes.
Mark, not to interrupt you, we did do a greater density in Harbor Village than we did Mallard Point.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is this is Harbor Village I'm talking is on this phase 4, it's a number of units per net acres.
Right.
And the average lot size is 0.36, so about a third of an acre versus say a half or even to some you said acres out there in Mallard Point. So
yeah, all off lake lots are an acre in Mallard Point.
Thank you, Mr. Smith and Mr. Talbot and Mr. Coons. Appreciate that. I guess, are we gonna allow Mr. Billings to answer some of those concerns or questions? Charlie?
He might have a comment or two. I don't know. It seemed like much of that was addressed actually to staff and commission, but
right.
I'm sure
I would agree.
Have a position on some.
Mr. Billings, you have any comments? And if not, we'll take the next question.
Mr. Chairman, you're asking an attorney if he has comments.
I have dinner waiting for me since about 6 o'clock. So, but you are more than welcome to at any time, Mr. Billings.
I think a lot of this is correct. It are questions for Mr. Kane and Mr. Summers and maybe Mr. Krebs. I would point out a couple of things that I don't think there's disagreement, although maybe the initial tone or tenor may sound like there's disagreement. I don't think they're disagreeing with our plan. I don't think they're disagreeing with phase 4. I know there's some comments about density, but it's less dense than originally approved. I know there's some comments about water runoff, but the water runoff is no different than exactly as it is today. All our water has to be handled appropriately through construction plans. I think the issue is this connectivity issue, which, if in a perfect world, we wouldn't even want to be fighting this. We would just say, yeah, let's not have connectivity. We are a realism to understand what staff has said, and we understand a value of what staff has said. And therefore, we have decided as a decision by the applicant to say, we think that having emergency access is not a bad idea. And it wasn't we're going to die on this sword for no access, because we do think it's a good idea. I am very confident as an attorney that I can create a legal document called an easement agreement with a drawing that is binding upon the Wilhoites, and it is binding upon Flying Dutchman and its successors and assigns, which means HOA and future lot owners, that the easement is a private emergency access easement only, not intended for public walking, not intended for bicycling, not intended for scooters, for four-wheelers. And the gate and the fences that will be there will not allow those except to cut that chain for emergency vehicles to go through there. and it would be reattached. They're correct. They're two totally different developments. They are two totally separate types of developments for density and price points. But ignore that there are master plans that, as I told you transparently and candidly, there are master plans that show some type of proposed connection from 2004. We have recognized that with respect to staff's position respectfully.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Let's open it to the next, it looks like, is it Dan Kale? If I pronounce that right? Matt, can you make that happen?
I am here. It's pronounced call.
Call, I'm sorry, sir. I'm trying.
Hey,
Thank
that was actually, that was good. That was good.
Excuse me, Mr. Call, could you raise your right hand, please?
Thank you, Charlie.
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for an opportunity to speak. I wanted to argue differently on the lack of impact of the watershed. If you look at the map, I'm sorry. So I'm a resident of Mallard Point, a property owner, received the notice in the mail of the public meeting. I do want to highlight that the notice web link in the letter that was sent out did not work for this Zoom meeting. So I'm not sure if you've got full representation of the neighborhood. I was able to access the Zooms through an account that I use with my employment, but that's something that I think you'll want to check. I wanted to say that about that second entrance. I am actually a property owner about I think 3 to 4 lots away from where the proposed access road would meet Mallard Point Drive. And where that road actually meets Mallard Point Drive, if you look at that map, is one lot away from the water's edge at the top of these lakes that create the quality of life and the value of the properties of Mallard Point. And so putting a paved road that actually is a funnel straight into the lot that is the edge of the top of this watershed, I can't imagine that there would not be significant runoff, both speed and just a direct line into this watershed. And while there may not be a lot of paved area that it would be pulling from, it nonetheless would change the dynamics, I think, of the hydrology of the watershed. And if it impacts the quality of the lakes, it impacts my property and my home. And so I'm very much against this. Yeah, and so actually that was, I think, the sum of everything else. Mr. Smith, Mr. Talbot, Mr. Coons represented Mallard Point well, but I do believe this would fundamentally alter the watershed, or at least would need some type of remediation to divert the stormwater from running directly into the top of this watershed. And so there would need to be an assessment, and there would need to be some accommodations made, I think, if you were wanting to put that road in. I do agree with the Scott County staff that a second access is important. You've got over 800 residents there, 206 homes in phases 3 and 4 that are one tree branch away from being isolated from any kind of emergency support. And so, I mean, with that dense development and one access road, I do think there are some issues with that, and I hope that the planning department takes that very seriously. However, again, I'm very much opposed to a paved connection to the Mallard Point Drive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Next, it looks like we've got Mr. Hobbs with his hand raised. Matt, if you'd connect. Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, this is Gary Hobbs.
Mr. Hobbs, if you raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to give to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's comments. My name is Gary Hobbs. I live in the lower income area of Harbor Village, as has been pretty well announced with them between Harbor Village and Mallard Point. Appreciate everybody making that known. I have two quick questions. Number one is, if you have this emergency gate and it does go in between Harbor Village and Mallard Point, who maintains that gate? If all it takes is a chain being cut, whose responsibility is it to maintain that?
Mr. Billings, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, our suggestion is the HOA both installs signage and maintains that as part of the HOA's common area responsibility to keep that gate in good repair and shape and keep it chained and locked. And
So you're saying, so the
agreement with the Wilhoites would reflect that it is not their responsibility to do that. It is the new HOA's responsibility.
Yeah. I wouldn't, and I wasn't suggesting that it be the Wilhoites' responsibility. So that would be the new HOA. And that kind of is a segue into my second question is, I wasn't real clear on the new HOA. Is that going to be a part of the Harbor Village HOA, or is this going to be a new HOA? And could you repeat that, please, if you could?
Absolutely.
Or clarify. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good question, sir. Absolutely. Give me 1 second here, because I'm going to pull up something on my computer so I can read directly from it. The original declaration of covenants, conditions, restrictions that was created for Harbor Village provided that additional property could be added into Harbor Village for so long as the developer or what is called the declarant, who was Merrick Development Corporation, who Mr. Smith was a principal, owns property in the Harbor Village development plan area. That ceased a number of years ago for reasons that are outside of this call. As a result, in order to submit new property into the existing Harbor Village HOA, that document has to be legally amended, which, when you look at it, requires a vote of the owners of Harbor Village. As you're probably aware, the owners in Harbor Village are very hard to engage a willing consensus of a small number, much less a majority of the entire neighborhood. So the board of Harbor Village will need to make a determination that it wants to incur the costs to go and undertake the legal steps to amend that document to add in phases 3 and 4 into the existing Harbor Village HOA restrictions. The Flying Dutchman, the applicant, has expressed since 2018 a willingness to do that and has had at least a half dozen conversations with the board, which, as you probably know, changes from year to year, and the temperament from that board changes year to year. What we have promised as the developer for both phase 3 and phase 4 is, even if Harbor Village doesn't want phase 3 and phase 4 submitted into it, the developer is going to submit phases 3 and 4 into an HOA. And I know Mr. Summers has seen my set of deed of restrictions before. They are about as thorough and detailed. And this is no offense to people who live in Harbor Village, because those were drafted in the 80s, and the ones I have done, I've got 30 years of legal work between those two. I didn't do those sets, but we have what I would call a ball busting set of restrictions that are very thorough. They're very comprehensive. They're very engaging. So even if these units are not submitted into Harbor Village, there will be an HOA to create for all of these lots that will pay dues to maintain the common areas on these lots, including the gate, and not just the phase 4 areas, but also the phase 3 areas. And there have been discussions about things like the owners of phase 3 and phase 4 don't get to use the lake in the front of Harbor Village if they're not there. So it's probably maybe a little bit more detail than you wanted, but it's got some pretty specific information. I'm happy to talk with any of the owners in Harbor Village about.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Mr. Hobbs, any other questions?
One last question. Would, Mr. Billings, would you make that your documents that you're talking about for a homeowners association for this new phase? Could you make that available to us as well as this presentation that's been provided today?
Yeah, if you'll send me an email, I'll send you the PowerPoint presentation and our draft HOA docs.
Certainly. Do you have contact information?
If you Google Billings Law Firm, I'll pop right up. You can email me from there.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. Next on the list is Brad Olson. Brad, I think you should be able to speak.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
You can,
Mr.
definitely.
Olson, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear what you're about to say to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Brad Olson. I live in the Harbor Village subdivision. And really, some of my questions actually just got answered in that last one regarding the phase 3 and phase 4 HOA. My main concern thinking about this is you're basically creating another subdivision that will not have any skin in the game in Harbor Village, but drive right through us to where we could become kind of the dumping ground for that. We already, with people not in the subdivision, deal with a lot of speeders, crazy drivers, people using our lake, people using our playgrounds that are not part of our subdivision. And by doing this and segregating that HOA, as good as Mr. Billings' document probably is, it's a piece of paper, and is up to us to actually do the work of enforcing that. So I guess just generally my viewpoint is I'm opposed to this. I would like to see, and maybe it is me also talking to our board, of course, here too, our HOA, but how we could merge those and grow Harbor Village as one neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Other hands I see up, it looks like John Talbot's got his hand back up again. Matt, would you unmute Talbot, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Coons?
Mark, I needed to say one thing in reference to a comment made by Mr. Hobbs. I believe earlier when I described Harbor Village, I'd like to clear this up, that I described that we developed it to be at a lower price point. I don't think that we ever said low income, and nor would I. And I'd also like to tell Mr. Hobbs that I not only was a resident of Mallard Point, I was also a resident of Harbor Village for some time. And I can assure you that the quality of life in both communities is equal. So if any offense was taken, it certainly was not intended, nor would it be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
This is Bruce Coons. I would like to make a comment. And Mr. Olson, I couldn't agree with you more with some of the comments that you made about the problems controlling folks coming in that are not residents or moving back and forth. Mr. Billings, with all due respect to you and your expertise and experiences, to have a piece of paper that says, people aren't allowed to walk down, for sake of conversation, this emergency vehicle path that we don't want, we're not supporting, we're objecting to, is kind of like a fantasy. I deal with this throughout the year with people, coming to me and saying, we've got people that aren't supposed to be here, accessing and doing things. I've dealt with a number of, I've worked with, I should say, a number of the owners of property that had purchased this property surrounding both Harbor Village and Mallard Point. And the one common complaint that they've asked for us to help with is trespassing and violations and damage to their property. And we can say that in a document that no one is allowed to walk down it. But I will guarantee you, I'm going to ask the question, who's going to control it? And that's what Mr. Olson was talking about. It is a very real issue, and having a connection between the two subdivisions will only promote that type of activity and problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. Looks like Daniel Rayner, the engineer on this application, wants to speak. Matt, would you turn his mic on?
I've got it on. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I wanted to, before I got too far down the road, I just wanted to address some of the comments that Dan, Carl, and Bruce had about the watershed of the project and environmental impact. It's hard to see on the plan, but in the very northwest corner, there's lots, basically 84 lots, 87 through, or 5 lots, 83 through 87. Those are on the ridge and the top knob of the hill. From there south, or on this plan, looking at it from there to the left, everything drains away from Mallard Point. That corner up there is the knob, and there's a portions of those lots that does drain back towards Mallard Lake, but that total area is only about 2 acres or so. And the street and those, so that knob would essentially still drain the same way. There'd be a portion of it that would be cut down for their houses, but the back ends would still drain in the same direction. They wouldn't plan on, cutting down the whole knob or anything like that. So as far as what kind of impact on the watershed would have to Mallard Point, it'd have very minimal impact, but we would be required regardless to meet all stormwater regulations that Ben Krebs and the city of Georgetown have to meet, as well as making sure we're checking the dry run watershed and how that would impact that watershed.
Thank you, Mr. Reiner. Any other, it doesn't look like I see anybody else's hand up. Oh, I do have a Rhea Compton. Mrs. Compton, would like to speak? Your mic should be on.
Ms. Thompson, you raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief.
Oh, I think her mic's off again.
How's that?
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You swear or affirm?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, the things I want to say, I'm the secretary of the board of the HOA in Harbor Village. And I would like to say we have met with Ryan a couple of times at our meetings, and Mr. Billings also. We have asked multiple times for them to join our HOA. They have never given us an answer, really. We're willing to work with them and see them. We are trying to revise some of our bylaws. And they did say, that some of them does not contain them or some of their things they want, but they've never come about and say what they would like to see. But we are willing to work with them, and we're really trying. We have asked them multiple times to come to meetings here the last couple of months. They've had something to do, but we are trying to keep a good relationship with them. But we really would like to see them join our HOA. That's just what I wanted to say today.
I'll let Mr. Billings probably speak to that. Mr. Billings?
I thought you said before you let me speak. I'm sorry. I thought you had something else to
Oh,
say.
no, I'm always open the mic to you, Mr. Billings.
Ms. Compton, I apologize. I did not know you had reached out in the last couple of months, or I would have reached out again.
Yes,
we had a conversation. You've been on the board. This is your second year, I believe, correct?
Well, I was on the board before. Also, I was on the board about 2 years before. Yes. And this makes my second year this term. Yes. Okay.
So because we had a a 2 or 3 hour meeting in 2018 with the then existing board.
Yes.
Discussed, and I'm not sure if you were present at that meeting.
I was. That was
Actually,
not a good meeting. I understand.
And so from that meeting, what I understand is that, Mr. Foster has reached out a number of times, and our position continues to be, if the HOA wants to spend the money to go get the signatures from the owners to submit into Harbor Village,
Okay,
we're willing to look to do that. What I guess we've never seen back is from you all, and perhaps this is just communication, is that the board is willing to spend that money to go door to door because of the, what I would describe as apathy to try to get owners out, and a concern that you're going to spend a bunch of money and not get the signatures. So what I would suggest either way is we have represented in all three of these public meetings. And I have said publicly in the meetings with the HOA that we are very open to discussing going into Harbor Village. I think what the concerns we heard was that it would increase the use on the lake.
yes,
What's currently there. That people were concerned about spending the attorney's fees to go get signatures and then it not being done. And the funding to take over the new HOA areas that would have to be given to Harbor Village HOA that are on these development plans.
that has never been mentioned to us. I don't know why someone didn't come to us and mention that when we have asked so many times for you to join us. No one has mentioned anything of that to us. There's just been a miscommunication somehow.
And I apologize. And I believe it's been communicated, and I'm happy to re-communicate that with Mr. Stringer and the board to help facilitate that communication then.
Let me ask you, Mr. Billings, because I've seen this before in other subdivisions and phases of subdivisions. Generally, I know I've been on the commission, I guess, for probably about 6 years now. Usually, I like to see new phases, especially of the same subdivision, join the HOA, just so everybody's on the same level, same kind of rules, et cetera. Was phase 1, 2, and 3 part of the current HOA, and phase 4 is wanting to possibly be their own HOA?
No, it would be that phases 1 and 2 were submitted into the HOA to the what's called the document, the declaration, while a developer still had authority to submit them into that declaration. And that the problem was phase 3 and 4 got sold off without development rights to submit those documents into the HOA legally. So phase 1 and several subsections of phase 2 are all submitted into the existing Harbor Village common property regime. But the document provides that in order to submit new property in there, it has to be approved by the association. It says, essentially, I'm reading from section 2.02, additions to existing property, is that at such time as the developer shall not be the fee simple owner of any lots subject to this declaration, the association shall thereafter solely exercise a right to subject additional property to this declaration. And then there's a process you have to execute a recordable instrument citing approval of that proposed addition by the owners.
Gotcha. So it's not necessarily that you or your clients are opposed to becoming part of the HOA. It's just a process that needs to happen.
That's correct. And that's what I think I've answered that same question all 3 years is we're going to submit our documents into an HOA, and there's a synergy to submit it into an existing HOA. That existing HOA has to be willing to do that and want to do that. And they also have to comply with a process to do that.
So Mrs. Compton, it sounds like they're willing to and want to. It's just a process and maybe lack of communication that needs to take, or communication that needs to take place here in the near future.
What I would suggest is with respect to the staff condition, as I referenced earlier, is that condition is appropriate, that there has to be an HOA created. I do suggest striking that last line because if it cannot be done by agreement or with the owners taking action, we're in a legal quandary. But we know, I mean, we do other work for Harbor Village that is outside the development stuff with collections. I don't do it. I don't know. I think Chris Ferris, my firm, does. So I know we have connections there to engage that communication between Flying Dutchman principals and the board. I can promise you this is not something that's going to fall through the cracks and not have one. I think maybe it's just forcing the issue with the HOA. Primarily phase 3, as you all are aware, is just now, the roads are just now getting installed. So it's still 6 months from even starting to sell lot. Well, maybe not 6 months, maybe 3 or 4 months. So there hasn't even been a need to push the issue to a resolution yet.
Have you talked to Chris Ferris about it? He is our attorney.
I have, and what Chris has told is Chris and I have talked about is because he's in our firm, we can't represent both sides of this. We have what's called a legal conflict. We can't represent Mallard Point HOA on one side and the developer on the other side. So we've got to have, you all will have to have separate counsel to deal with that. And my understanding is he's told that to, I think, the president.
Okay.
And actually I was on an email for that, so I'm almost positive that was communicated.
Thank you, Mrs. Compton. Any other questions for Mrs. Compton? Otherwise, it looks like I've got a hand up by John Talbot again. Give it a second. Matt's making it happen. You should be unmuted, Mr. Talbot. Does he have to unmute himself, Matt?
Yes, he has the ability to unmute himself right now.
Mr. Talbot, if you, or Mr. Smith or Coons, if you have a question, please unmute yourself and ask away. Yep, I can hear you. Well, of course, get close to the microphone, please.
Great. Well, thank you all for your patience tonight. I just kind of want to wrap up on behalf of Mallard Point Association that if the commission is inclined to approve this development, which we oppose, but we would like it to be approved without the connection in any form. We just think that the idea of sharing, having an emergency exit that's shared with 2 driveways is a questionable benefit. It's not needed. Both these developments have existed for decades without it. And in fact, it'll be harmful to the integrity of both of them. So we think that if you're inclined to approve it, it should not include this connection. The other thing is we think that in connection with this development, if it gets approved, there should be a condition added that they need to have a drainage study and they need to take, special efforts to direct all the water away from Mallard Point Lake. And it's lake system. It's an important resource for the community, as Mark pointed out. And that should be an added requirement of the developer that if the Wilhoites are going to grant this easement, that they participate in that study, and that Flying Dutchman engage a study to show that there's not going to be any drainage, as was represented by Mr. Rayner earlier, just to substantiate that. So I guess to sum it up, we request it be denied, but if it's going to be approved, we request it be done without a connection. And in any event, if it's going to go forward, that there be the complete watershed study of all the impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions by anybody? Looks like we still have about 14 people in attendance, not including the commissioners. So is there any other questions? If so, click on to raise your hand, and Matt Summers will be happy to unmute you. Otherwise, is there any questions as we're waiting on attendees to ask questions by the commission? Y'all have been pretty quiet. Mr. Mifflin?
Yes, sir. I've got a couple. Just for the record, if Mr. Talbot is still on there, I know that in the last 5 or 6, no more than 10 years, Mr. Smith alluded to other developers on 3 different streets. I know, I think Haddock's Construction and Ball Homes have all built out there. How did you handle the HOA, or was there a problem of these new developers coming in and building specific streets and then joining the HOA? Was there any problem with you all?
Mr. Smith and I represented one of the prior developers who built the lots Doe Court and Blackberry Ridge that Mr. Smith referred to. We just did it by a simple amendment, adding the new lots as being bound by the then existing restrictions. So there was no slippage in that at all. It was a really very simple process. Mark Smith facilitated it, and and it's worked very well, I think.
And this is for a stretch. We are also doing the same thing with the Pinnacle, which is a Haddock's development. So yeah, we have a provision on how we do that, and we always look forward to working with folks. But the mother document, the mother declarations of covenants, easements, and restrictions are basic to everyone that joins. So, but yeah, we have a process, and it's worked for decades.
Any other? I'm sorry, what did you say? I could hardly hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The process has worked over several decades with multiple developers to join, additional lots as they've been constructed.
Thank you.
So that shouldn't really be a problem between Harbor Village and Flying Dutchman then, with the HOA portion of it.
I'm not sure what Nathan was referring to on the legalities of it, as far as I guess what he said there.
Mr. Billings, did you want to speak to that? I think to answer Charlie, well, I think he's looking for reaffirmation of your thoughts. Is it doesn't sound like joining the HOA is going to be an issue.
So I as I've said, or tried to communicate a couple of times, I don't know what how Mallard Point was developed. You can do a development one of several ways. So for example, you can file a declaration at the beginning that says, this is our 3,000 acres, which will be submitted into the regime. And it's in every subsequent property owner, whether it's the original developer or not, has the right to submit those in. I don't know if that's how Mallard Point's written or not. All I can tell you is how the Harbor Village Declaration is written, which says that the developer has the right to submit additional property in to the HOA as long as it owns lots. But at the such, and I'm happy to share my screen and show the exact legal language. At such time as the developer doesn't own property anymore, then only the association can do that, can exercise that right by executing a recordable instrument reciting approval of the proposed addition. And so that has to be an action taken by those owners in this process. Again, there's going to be an HOA. There's never not going to be an HOA. The existing HOA board will need to make a decision if it wants to go through that process and accept the benefits and accept the costs. I don't make that decision for them, nor can I make it for them. We have said since 2018, we're open to that. We're not opposed to it. We haven't needed to push the issue yet because we're not selling any lots yet in phase 3. My view of this is that it's sort of the tail wagging the dog with whether this is submitted into Harbor Village or not. And the main reason is this: none of the subdivision regulations actually provide for this. This is just an additional sort of staff comment, which is a best practice. We agree it's a best practice, but I don't think it can be a legally required thing by the Planning Commission because again, and I'm not faulting Merrick for this, but Merrick made a decision not to write it a different way. So I'm only going off what Merrick Property wrote back in 1988. It looks like Eric Smith wrote those. I don't know who that is.
Any other questions? Looks like a Scott Romano wants to speak.
God, do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir.
I just have a couple things. Just to clarify on the Harbor Village HOA, Mr. Billings correct. It'll take not just a simple majority of people that attend a meeting, but it's going to take 51% of the 195 residents in order to amend those documents. So that's going to be real difficult. I mean, at a typical HOA meeting, we get 15 people.
Mr. Romano, are you on your board?
I was on the board.
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's he's exactly right. It is going to be difficult. But I was at a meeting recently where the people from, as Mrs. Compton mentioned, the people from the developer, Flying Dutchman, were supposed to show up and they didn't show up. So the feeling in Harbor Village is I don't think they have enough information to make an educated decision. I just wanted to let you guys know that. The second question I have is, isn't there any other way for them to get an easement going the opposite direction to the, I guess that would be to the west instead of going north? I was just curious with that. If I look at a big map, there seems to be a couple properties there that they could possibly get an easement on and connect with whatever that new connector road is over there that they got that traffic circle at.
Bypass.
Yeah,
Probably ask Mr. Reiner, if not Mr. Billings, to answer that.
I'll let Mr. Rainer talk about the engineering side of it. Because of staff's early discussions with us about phase 4 and the connectivity into Mallard Point, we have sort of looked at that as the primary place because of the 2004 master plan. Have we exhaustively looked at other areas? No. I mean, there's conceptually, legally, 4 or 5 different ways, but those roads would be much longer and much more difficult to construct and probably much more expensive to acquire and don't provide the bilateral benefit for emergency access to both developments in that case. Mr. Rayner may have some engineering comments too.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Mr. Rayner?
And what road specifically were you talking about?
Well, doing the connection going the opposite way, it would take getting easements over probably 2 or 3 other properties, but connecting over to the bypass. I'm just curious if they've even explored that. And if I can just address what was just said, it's not, there's, from what I can see and what I listened to from the Mallard Point representatives, there's no benefit to them at all for this. They don't see any benefit of this at all.
So connecting back to the bypass would be about 4,500 feet to get from this part of the property down to there, versus from here to Drake Lane is only about, only about 300 feet. So, and like you said, that would be crossing multiple different people's property, go right next to the existing Harbor Village lake there. And you'd be going through some pretty steep ravines and back up them. And so it's really even less feasible to go that way. If someone wanted to, I mean, so I guess that's my answer to that.
Thanks, Mr. Rayner. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, the comment about the Flying Dutchman person missing the meeting with the HOA, just so the commission knows, I think what happened is that there was a meeting scheduled by the HOA that Flying Dutchman was going to attend. That board rescheduled that meeting and canceled it and didn't give us when the renotice date was. And so it was not an intentional failure to attend. It was that they moved a meeting date and didn't tell Johnny Bruce it was. So it wasn't to slight or to be negligent. It was he didn't know. Again, it's
Thank you.
an issue.
Yep, I hear you. And a lot of times we get that a lot because I think once parties communicate and can come to terms, it makes our job a little easier. So appreciate that. I do have a couple questions. So is the applicant willing to do a stormwater study? Or I know one of the conditions, of course, is to get the, and I'm starting to get.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before anybody answers that, I would just like to say that had Mr. Smith still been developing both of these properties, that stormwater wouldn't have been a question because he would have had that addressed early in his development. And so I think this is just grabbing at straws, trying to look at anything to make it look non-feasible because Mr. Smith had this development planned all along, and he wouldn't have developed something that would, cause problems with another one of his properties. And like we talked about Monday, had Merrick Properties still been the owner of both of these, none of these problems would have been coming before us tonight. It's after you sell them off for no one's fault, but ownership changes over time. And then just like this Wilhoite property, that originally was part of Mallard Point and would have been part of their development. And then that was sold off, and they applied for a minor subdivision plat, which changed everything. And Mr. Smith even admitted at some point in time in the concept plan, there was going to be a road through there, but it would be gated. And so, now tonight, I see no problem with an emergency route through there. I don't see how we could enforce a legal street through private property. That's went out the window a long time ago. But some of these things, the problems are because we don't have the same development. And I think Mr. Smith would probably agree with most of what I said, that if he still owned both of these, we wouldn't be discussing this like we have tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mifflin. And under conditions 7, 8, and 9, it talks about getting with our engineer to review construction policies, drainage plans in number 8, and also stormwater ordinance in number 9. So I really, really would think that it would comply with all needed stormwater drainage with regards to the county and planning and zoning standards.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Smith.
I want to make a comment as well. I think if this emergency access road was put in, I'm sure the Wilhoites don't want people trespassing through their property either. If that gate was put up, I don't know what the fence would be on either side of that gate, but I would think the gate probably needs to be fairly substantial, and maybe it needs to be a 6-foot high chain link gate or something. But
yeah, and it's the one thing we probably don't have as an example of what a emergency only gate looks like. Because I'll be honest, I'm trying to picture it myself, Mr. Smith, of how it's a gate that would stop all traffic. Skateboarders, bike riders, a walking path. What would deter anything about emergency vehicles using that gate?
If you remember, we approved earlier this year an emergency road for Toyota 2 Show, and they were going to have an emergency gate put in there that could be used for that same type of purpose. What did they end up putting in?
I'll be honest, I've not gone out there to see what it looks like.
And it may not be completed yet.
Right.
say the people at the Brent Spence Bridge right now are trying to figure out how in the world they're going. They had a fire on the bridge and they
get back and forth between Cincinnati and northern Kentucky.
Well, and I think I'm with you, Mr. Smith, and you, Mr. Mifflin, in the sense of, we've talked about this for other subdivisions. We talked about if there's 200 units or more that we would require as a planning and zoning, there be a second entrance for emergency purposes at minimal. I'm probably leaning more towards an emergency access type gate than I am, I guess, opening up both subdivisions to each other. Because I think it was Ben Krebs who may have pointed this out Monday, not necessarily that, the main or only road into a subdivision gets flooded or there's an accident, but what if there needs major work on that road that they need to close it down for any short period of time? Now, I don't know, an emergency access only road probably wouldn't help unless you did in fact open that up for residents to get in and out if construction or some emergency took place on the other main entrance to that subdivision. Came to mind, and Mr. Smith, I don't know, I just thought about, this was Monday, the lake that the drainage pipe rotted away and it had to be replaced. What if you needed to have bulldozers on that road to get that replaced, and it shut that road down, even if it's for a half a day or a whole day, and that was right on the main entrance to get out of the subdivision? How would that play out then? And that was something we kind of talked about Monday, and Mr. Smith wasn't on the call. So.
It could even be a down power line, or, you know.
Yeah, right, maybe. Mr. Talbot raised his hand. Matt, if you wouldn't mind, that's probably Mr. Smith replying to my comment.
Well, it is, Mark. And how do you deal with if something happens on the roadway? It's the same thing you do on US 25, where they're redoing it right now.
Right.
They route you, they stop the traffic, they route you through one lane while they're fixing one, then they move you over to the other side and they route you back that side.
And I mean, you said at both subdivisions. Has there ever been a closing of the main entrance to either of those subdivisions over the 38 years that you've been involved in those two subdivisions?
We did have repairs going when Mr. Haddix cut across the roadways of Mallard Point Drive to put in the primary sewer and water extension to the Pinnacle. They did that the same way. They closed one lane down at a time, cut through the roadway, installed the pipe, filled it in, moved the metal back to the other side, and did it the other way. So, I mean, we have, we would do it just like they do in Main Street.
Right. You'd work around it. I hear you.
That's every place has got 2-lane roads. So, I mean, it's just standard. And I do agree with Charlie Mifflin to an extent. If we did it, we would have done it to where there was not any impact on our runoff. But Charlie, we're not doing it. These gentlemen are doing it. And we don't know that the impact, the topography is going to change. It's already changing. There's already a change with just the driveway for 2 houses. And then if they do that and it becomes 10 foot, 20 foot that goes all the way to another subdivision, I'm sure there would be an increase in runoff. I don't know what that would be, and that's why I recommended the study. But I agree with 99.95% of what you said. Yes, sir.
That's pretty good, Mr. Smith. Thank you. I do have a question, and this may be a little off topic, and I'm not even sure who mentioned it or said it, but it was one of the people who were on the phone here. They said that they initially went through the Zoom meeting access that was given on the letter, and they were not able to join the Zoom meeting. I think at most we had 17 people in attendance, not including the commission and our attorney. Is there concern, or maybe while we're still talking, Mr. Billings, can you check that to make sure? Because I'm worried that if our community didn't get their say, that we may not have had enough people here to either be in favor or opposed. Because I mean, that does concern me. And I think when I said that, I had about 4 hands go up. So I don't know if, Matt, you want to turn those people on and see. And I think it may have been Mr. Call who was the one who said that the link didn't work. So if you, yeah. Mrs. Lewis, I think
the notice is out, so I'm not sure, but I can tell you that the link on the website works. So even if for some reason there's a typo or some type of misinformation in the notice, all they have to do is go to the website and click on the webinar registration, and it takes them right into the meeting.
The planning and zoning website?
Correct.
Okay. Mrs. Lewis, I think your mic's unmuted if you had something to say.
First off, Ms. Lewis, you raise your right hand. You swear affirm what you're about to say to be the truth to the best of your information and belief.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I am right now the sitting president for Harbor Village HOA. I apologize that I was not on earlier. I planned to be on tonight. I'm extremely sick. However, the board has been blowing me up, and I apologize if you can see me, but I have been extremely sick for the past few hours. I just want to state that first. Second, I guess there's an issue saying that we are changing board meetings and not letting you guys know. To my knowledge, Rhea and I have both texted multiple times and emailed every time there's been a board member change or a board meeting change. The reason for any board meeting change is because we've either had board members that can't make it, 3 out of the 6, or something has came up with someone's family. But I have always tried to let Ryan know, or his attorney.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. Mr. Call.
Thank you. Yeah, I had mentioned it, and I sent a screenshot with the URL and the website response that you get to the GSC planning office. But I'm not sure who else would like to see that, but Mark,
If you
you're
send
right.
an email, I'll have planning and zoning maybe share that with Attorney Billings, and then
That'd be good.
Billings' point, if you're having problem, again, I guess you would have probably just clicked on it right before the meeting and then went into panic mode, which is sometimes what I do if I can't join a meeting for some reason, technical difficulties or whatever. But, prior to the meeting, even an hour, you don't know that doesn't work until you try to get on it. So
That's right. And it's the website that is that follows the wording that says you may join by going to this link, and the link did not work. So yeah, you might look at that. I sent the website.
Well, that just concerns me a little, just because if somebody, like I said, I kid you not, I think I joined the meeting here 5 minutes before 6 o'clock. And I know Joe and Matt sometimes get a panicked call when my Zoom meeting isn't working or I'm having difficulties. So
yeah, I get it.
I apologize about that.
Mark, and I can speak to that.
Yes, sir. I was getting ready to call you.
I was
So
just double checking our link that we sent out, which is copy and pasted from what we get from you all. It does match what's on the website. And so if you click on the website, it takes you to the same address that's showing on our notification. So I don't know what trouble he had getting on. He may have, I have problems with computers all the time. So
trust me, I do too. So don't take it personally, Mr. Cole. I'm probably guilty. Matt's our expert here. And I think the youth has it. Thanks, Mr. Summers.
It could be user error. Yeah, but go ahead and double check that web.
Appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Mr. Wilhoite looks like he's got a question as well. JC. Mr. Wilhoite? Matt, did you unmute him?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. I guess I need to swear.
Is this a different?
Yes, this is the brother, Charlie, if you wouldn't mind swearing JC in.
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to give be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, sir. Yes, I did.
And the only reason I knew you were the brother is because your brother had a picture of his family. You just got a big on yours. So I knew it was different.
I guess, well, one thing, just a real quick comment about the Zoom. I think there might be an issue. You have to be logged in with a name. That's something that popped up. And I think he said he had to log in through his work. I think that was really the only thing. You had to create an account. But my main question is really for us. We don't really want a lot of people walking through our property. I don't know if it's going to be different if there's our driveway is where it is. And yeah, I don't want a lot of people, like anybody. No way, you don't want a lot of people walking through your property. So as far as that goes, I hope that's, we're all in the same accord there. But one question I do have is an emergency access. So what exactly is an emergency? I'm assuming that it's going to be like some emergency vehicles, but obviously if there's something greater going on, we would be good neighbors and, be hospitable to that if people need to get in and out. But kind of, I guess, what would be an emergency?
Joe, do you want to answer that question?
Well, I would think fire, so fire vehicle, fire trucks and ambulance would be what I would think.
And possibly police and sheriff.
Yeah. I think there was a thought about, something going on with construction, on one, if a road's closed, and then, okay, so this is a way for people to get in and out. I don't know if that would necessarily be the best use. It may be hard for that, but you know, again, that's something I guess if we had to, we could work out. But you know what I'm saying?
I think in a very rare situation, if the main entrance to the subdivision's closed, I would think that probably with the sheriff's assistance, that gate would be open to exit out of the subdivision. And again, I think Mark Smith said it, in his years, roughly 38 years, he can only remember once or twice there ever being a road closed for a short period of time, but traffic redirected or routed around. So even with that being said, I don't think the emergency gate would need to be open. Traffic would just be rerouted on the second lane.
Again, that's my thought too. I just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
I appreciate that, Mr. Wilhoite.
We agree on behalf of applicant with what it was just said. That's what we've intended to.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Anybody else in the crowd? Because we've spent a lot of time on this one. And thanks to everybody for speaking and input, answers, etc., to everything. Mrs. Lewis looks like she's got another question.
The same question I had earlier. Board members were texting me saying that there is an issue that they aren't being invited to meetings, and that is absolutely not true.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Lewis. Hope you feel better.
Chairman.
Anything else? Yes.
I had one other question. There was
yes, Commissioner Smith.
Question brought up earlier regarding the, I think the stormwater or sewer water. It's probably sewer, I guess. That it would be connected into Mallard Point. I don't know if that was ever addressed. Is that an issue or?
No, I think the comment was that storm or sewer water wasn't being connected into Mallard Point. I think the issue or concern that Mallard Point had was runoff into Mallard Point and how it could potentially affect their lakes and the waters and things like that. I don't think.
I believe there was another question about the sewer.
And then Mr. Talbot did raise his hand, so I think
yeah, so
question to probably reinstate it.
Yeah, maybe Daniel can answer how the sewer is being handled. I know I put in my staff report that it's going into the Mallard Point system. So I know GMWSS bought the transmission lines and they handle the sewer.
Mr. Talbot, you've got your hand raised, and I think your mic's on, so you can speak to that. And
yes, this is Bruce Kuntz. I brought up the question of the sewer, and it has not been discussed.
So can you restate the question, and we'll try to get it answered for you?
Well, you know, and I agree. You know, it is in the staff report to the commission that this is an issue that must be verified, that it is will be able to handle it. And the diagrams that I've seen of the proposed development, I don't know where they're planning to tie in or where. The sewer line, the transmission line in Mallard Point at that in that area, and John, or Mark, help me if I say this wrong. It goes in two directions, and we're very concerned that another, you know, almost another third number of homes is coming into that system, and will the transmission lines and the entire system be able to handle that? And that was something that was in the staff report, saying it must be done, and I haven't heard any discussion on that.
Let me interject a little bit in there. I know a little bit about the wastewater up there. Georgetown Municipal Water and Sewer is excellent in what they do, and I'm sure they will address this. I would anticipate that a lot of the flow would go to the pump station at Harbor Village, but it may be that on Harbor Village Drive there, it may be though that they want to bring a certain amount of it to the connection on Drake Lane. At which point in time, but they would have the line capacity and sizing and whatnot for that. But the Wilhoites, you know, probably ought to think too that if that's the case, and if they're, as long as they're given easements and and this, that, and the other, they may have wastewater, coming through there as well. But like I say, Georgetown Municipal does excellent job in what they do. And I'm sure that if there's any line size requirements, there'll be line size increases, for it. I don't know that they wouldn't go two ways, but I don't know that they would either. That'd be a question for them.
And
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Hold on a second, Daniel. So, Mr. Chairman, the staff comments, if you look at the conditions of approval, one of the normal conditions that the commission approves is comment condition number 4, all requirements of the Mallard Point disposal and GMWSS regarding sanitary sewer connection. And what that means is that at this stage in the development process, when we're before the commission for a preliminary subdivision plat, we do not have to have required sewer drawings completed or approved for the exact construction of roads, a erosion control plan, the sanitary sewers. Daniel was going to talk about the preliminary plan of how to do it, but all the technical specifications are usually not drafted and prepared, and they're certainly not approved until we have to get tonight approved. Then we move forward to meet all those conditions before Mr. Krebs and Mr. Kane will ever sign off on the final subdivision plat, those construction plans. So you have, as Mr. Smith will tell you, it is sort of the cart before the horse and people don't know this is why they ask, for people to ask for approved sewer plans tonight, because you can't have them until this is approved first. Once that happens, there's a process that Mr. Rayner can talk about, Mr. Krebs can talk about how that works forward. And we don't get to build lots or plat the lots and sell them until that sanitary system is constructed and installed and accepted by GMWSS, just like the roads and other stuff is accepted by Mr. Krebs. But Daniel, you know how you've designed phase 3 and phase 4. So to talk about just an overview of the technical aspects.
Well, I'll agree with what you said, and the gentleman before you, Mr. Smith, about the GMWSS. They're the ones that set those requirements that we have to meet. They're the ones that accept the plans that we do. We have not yet done our design. We have proposed a system of how it's going to work. It will likely tie in to where phase 3 is. But like I said, GMWSS has to first grant us availability, tell us that their availability, and they have to approve our plans prior to we move forward. And we won't know that until we get this approved. And that's something that we would have to do on the next stage.
And to be clear, there is no sanitary sewer or storm water sewer access through the Wilhoite property. The only easement on the Wilhoite property that is being proposed and to discuss with them is for that emergency access only. So I don't want anybody to try to scare them or act like we're going to do something else. The only right to access that property is whatever they agree in writing with us. And it is not to run any sewer or storm sewer through there. There may be some natural drainage flow, but Mr. Rayner said that's less than 2 acres. It exists today. But we are not using that property anything except the emergency access. And I don't want them to think, if somebody asks a question, that they get afraid of that, because that's not true.
Thank you. Any further questions? Looks like Mr. Call has his hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, the question was on top of page 3 of the staff report. There's a sentence that says that all the lots in this phase, as in case with the existing lots in Harbor Village, require a low pressure force main system to transmit sewage into the Mallard Point sewer system. And so that we just weren't clear about what that meant.
I'm not sure if Mr. Rayner wants to answer that.
That's yeah, Harbor Village phase 4, page 3.
Ben,
top.
yeah, I followed you. Yeah. Who would like to answer that question?
Well, we haven't, like I said earlier, we haven't designed where this is going to tie into. We've already got a phase 3 approved, and this is an extension of that. So we are not planning on tying in across the Wilhoite's property. Again, we haven't designed it. We haven't had any review by GMWSS. They're the ones that own that sewage system over there or have taken over. And they would be the ones that ultimately tell us how they want us to, again, they can't tell us to go through someone else's property. We still have to get approval from them. It's not something they can tell us to do, but we have not designed it yet, but it will be a low pressure force main system due to the grade changes in here. You can't just drain the gravity from there all the way to the front. And that's how the existing phase 3 and I believe phase 2 is as well. They're on a low force main system.
Hey, thank you, Daniel. It looks like we don't have any other questions. So if there's any other comments, questions, I mean, I think we can, as a commission, start discussing this and look for next steps, whether that's an approval or a motion to approve or motion to deny, continuance. I mean, I'm open to anything and the direction of my fellow commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question for Joe. Joe, on the conditions, number 2, if we were to approve the emergency gate there, and according to Mr. Billings, they are in contact with the Wilhoites. Should that hard surface access road be connected to the Wilhoite property instead of Drake Lane? Because it's basically the Wilhoites drive that's coming up there that we're connecting to, isn't it?
I think it should say all the way to Drake Lane because they may have to rebuild the whole driveway. Right now it's gravel. I mean, it'll have to meet the weight requirement of the fire trucks and whatever the engineering standard is for the road construction.
Okay.
You know, it is only a 10-foot wide road. I think it'll likely have to be built to some quality all the way to Drake Lane.
Okay, and that would be the developer's responsibility, not Mr. Wilhoite's.
Correct.
It is our responsibility to obtain the easement, and then our responsibility to work with that owner to make sure it's constructed to the fire department's standards.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Any other comments by the commission?
I had one question for Mark Smith or Mr. Talbot. If there is an emergency exit or out of Mallard Point, is it also finished to those the specifications of the fire department? I mean, is it a concrete driveway, or I'm just curious, does Mallard Point have a backup plan if
We've not had a backup plan in 38 years, have not needed a backup plan in 38 years. And Harbor Village has not had a backup plan in 32 years, nor has it needed a backup plan in 32 years. There is no other roadway.
if the power line went down across the road, or if a tornado came through and closed one end of the subdivision off, would there be any other way in and out?
No, sir. And if a meteor landed and hit us and wiped it out, there wouldn't be either. No, sir.
Well, I don't think a down power line is quite that unlikely.
No. Well, we haven't had that experience, sir.
I thought at some point in time, probably Monday, somebody mentioned that there was an access road down by the dam, or
that's what I thought.
There's a private road that I own that goes through my property, but I own that. It's got a gate at the top of the hill. So it's private roadway, no trespassing.
Okay.
There's not an easement for common use or anything like that.
So, but you couldn't understand why the fire department would want to have a second way in to either one of these, either Mallard Point or.
I could absolutely understand, sir, but you know what I mean? I don't think it's in the interest of our community, for the stated reasons.
If an emergency came up, I think they would need it, but
Yes,
I
sir.
don't, I can understand exactly what you're saying as far as it's made perfectly clear to me that we don't want a public road going through there, and I'm sure the Wilhoites don't want that. And I don't think we want to make the road to where it looks like that people can use it for biking or walking or anything else. There should be a no trespassing sign on the gate, and really it probably doesn't even need to say anything. It just needs to be a gate with a lock on it.
We still on?
Yeah.
This is Bruce Coates. To the point that you're making, and I absolutely agree with you. We don't want that coming onto Mallard Point, and I know you certainly wouldn't want it to be on your property. But as I believe it was Mr. Olson said earlier, and I concur, I think all parties need to consider when that does occur. And I don't usually make bets, but I'd make bets on this one that it will occur. Who's going to manage it and try and control it? All right. That's an issue. It's been an issue in the past. Having this type of access, whether emergency, that's why we're saying we don't want it at all. But if it's there, even as emergency, it's not a question, in my opinion, of if someone trespasses on your property, it'll be a question of when, and then what will you do?
I'm sure if I were the Wilhoites, I would, if that lock was ever cut and somebody came through, I'd be putting one right back on it, and it might be a little bit larger chain, a little bit larger lock.
Right. I mean, I'm kind of like Stephen, and I think a couple other people have kind of showed a concern of, who manages it, who upkeeps it, what kind of signage, what kind of accessibility. I mean, if it's just a gate with two poles, one on each side of the road, what stops people from walking, riding a bike, skateboarding, you name it, up and down that road. Of course, if it's locked, and what's the, what else is to the side of that post to deter somebody from walking, riding, or even driving around that gate? So I'd have to, I'm like Charlie. I think the gate being really Mifflin, I think the gate being there is a great idea for emergency purposes only. And I think I'm very much in favor of the connectivity for that reason alone. I think everybody's pretty much voiced they do not want a full-blown access between the two subdivisions, because that'll take the uniqueness away from each of those subdivisions. And that kind of does make sense to me as well. So,
is there currently a fence there? I would assume if this is a development being put in, that it would be subject to the same regulations. There probably have to be a diamond wire fence built. And
I apologize. I haven't drove down the road, but I think both the Wilhoite brothers had mentioned
What is the current
gravel road currently, and their driveways lead or share that graveled road. So I don't think it's much of a road right now, but if I'm not mistaken, the applicant, I think, is paying for the pavement of the road, if I remember correctly.
Well, we have we are negotiating, or I should say, one of the principles of Flying Dutchman is negotiating with Wilhoites for the compensation and consideration for the emergency access easement, which has not been finalized. I don't know whether we will pay them money and they will construct it, whether we will pay to construct it and pay them some additional monies. I think that's where we sort of needed to get through tonight to know exactly what we needed to do to finalize those discussions with them.
Gotcha.
And I'll give you some, this isn't because it's a promise, but they've asked for some buffering property on our side to help protect their lot space. So it's an item that's on our side. We're willing to discuss with them and have discussed with them about that being one of the compensation items between us. Conceptually, two property owners can agree to put an easement across their property without any other property owners ever having a say in it. So conceptually, we could reach an agreement with the Wilhoites to put an easement across there for our owners to go to Drake Lane, and the Mallard Point people wouldn't have any right to ever object to that because it's a private right easement that's negotiated between two private property owners. Just like Mr. Smith could give Mallard Point HOA an easement across his land today and Harbor Village couldn't complain. It's just, that's the way easements between private property owners work.
Thank you, Mr. Billings.
Can I answer Steve's question about fencing?
Yes, sir.
These are two residential zones, urban residential zones. There are no fencing requirements between two single family residential zones. So there is no fencing required. And as far as the easement goes, that's not completely true, although I may not know the legal case law on it, but our easements in our subdivision regulations can serve only 3 residences. So I don't think they could have a private easement that could be opened up, you know, to all these properties for full use. But Charlie maybe can answer that too.
Well, it would have to be the county standards, but it wouldn't have to necessarily be dedicated. So they couldn't have the gravel and all that. No, sir, not open that up. You're right.
Thank you.
I think this is an emergency escape route, basically. Well, it's not even an escape route. It's a way for emergency vehicles to get in and out. Anything that's planned, you can, if you're going to do planned construction on a road, you can find a way to get in and out of there. But if it's unplanned, Mother Nature, if a main water line bursts under the road and all of a sudden there's a ditch across the road that's 10 feet deep and you have no way out, that's what this should be for. But otherwise, I hope it never gets used. You might build it and the gate never be opened in the next 40 years.
Correct. I agree with that. All right. Any other questions, comments? If not, I need some kind of a motion to do something. I think we've still got 1, 2, David Vest is still with us, 3, Regina 4, Mary's 5. Mr. Stone is still with Joe. I think he looks like he's still awake, so there's 6. So we've still got 6 members here, and I seen a nod. Thanks, Mr. Stone. I need some kind of a motion to either approve, decline, postpone, continue.
I'm still reading over things. I do feel like that the density is fairly high for the type of terrain that's on, but at 87, I don't think that we.
That could be a question, Mr. Smith, and maybe Mr. Billings or Daniel Rayner can answer this. Is the density in phase 1, 2, or 3 in comparison to 4? Because I'm looking at the map on 4, and I think I read it. The average lot size is 0.36. Units per net acres is 0.44. What does the density look like in the other 3 phases?
Give me one second, Mr. Chairman, because I actually looked at that plan density earlier, and I don't have it directly in front of me. I want to say the original proposed density in Harbor Village was 1/4 acre per lot.
So actually, the density in Harbor Village is less than what's being proposed. These are actually bigger lots.
Correct. That's why I said earlier, we actually had, I think it's 30 lots that we're not actually building in Harbor Village, that we're not maximizing the total density as originally proposed in Harbor Village. It's actually less, but I'm trying to find that reference again.
I've seen much smaller lots in the community being built. So when I seen these lot sizes, I've seen lot sizes that were 50-foot wide by 100, 110, 120 deep, which I think is our bare minimum. So when I'm looking at the lot sizes here, and I mean, most of them look like they were 82, roughly 82 and a half feet wide by, in most cases, it looks like, and I probably 170 foot deep. So I thought those were a lot bigger than some of the lots I've seen subdivisions we've approved. So I wasn't overly concerned.
So, Mr. Chairman, I put up a chart that we prepared in 2018. This is dated October of 18, and the acreage chart for phases 1 and 2. So this does not look at phase 3.
Did you say you put it up? I don't see it.
I can't put it up. It's on screen share. I'm just telling you what it shows is an average of 0.3771.
0.3771. Average lot size or units per net acre?
That's that adds up the acreage of every lot in phases 1 and phase 2. It averages every lot. We took 195 lots and put their actual acreage in to the thousandth of an acre. It's not in my presentation, Matt.
No problem. And you said it's 0.3. What'd you say, Mr. Billings?
0.3771.
So, I mean, it's actually almost the exact same, because the average lot size of this preliminary subdivision plat is 0.36. So really just about the same in my book.
And if you look at the lot size in phase 3 that we did, it is, the average lot size there was actually higher than that, 0.59 acres. So we actually, when you add phase 3 into that, it's actually going to make it even better.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just good to know, because while you look at the plat, it looks like they're on top of each other, but in realistically speaking, I mean, Harbor Village is a nice subdivision. I don't live there, but I've been through there several times, and the homes are beautiful, and the lots seem, fairly reasonable in comparison to some. Like I said, there's some out there that barely meet the minimum requirement, and I don't know how they do it. Any other questions for anybody? Like I said, I'm still entertaining some type of motion here, please.
I'm still trying to think this through.
All right.
From the comments I've heard especially from Mallard Point, if they don't want anybody, especially kids, I know kids are going to be kids. If there's no fence there, and we put a gate in, and there's no fence on either side of the gate, I don't know how it's going to work. But
yeah, unfortunately, I wish we had some type of a diagram of what an emergency fence would look like, or gate would look like, because
if I could to put the fence in, if you want to restrict the flow of people or bicycles or whatever from one point to the other, then
Joe or Matt, would you have seen that you both look like, I know Matt, it looks like Joe's in the office. Matt, are you in your office? No. Do you have access to some type of a diagram of what a emergency gate would look like? Matt or Joe or Ben? I don't know, Ben, if you've got access on a computer, if you've got a gate.
So, Mr. Chairman, what I might suggest is we've done 2 of these and other developments I've done. One of them was a mechanized gate with an electronic code, and the other one was a very nice metal farm gate with the width was 2 separate gates that are chained together in the middle. What I might suggest is a part of the condition and the fire gate to be approved by the fire department as well, and the type of gate and the locking mechanism on the gate.
That'd be fine. I'd appreciate that, because we want to keep everybody happy, especially Mr. Wilhoite.
I think Mr. Wilhoite should have a say in it as well. It's got to be something he likes.
Well, I would think he would have a say in it, Mr. Smith.
Plenty to say about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty
Mark, I've built a whole bunch of these kind of gates with my business, and it's actually what the customer wants. It could be anything from a bar with a brace. It could be a farm gate. It could be a fancy entrance gate. It could be whatever the individual wants to put up there.
So there really probably isn't much of a statute type gate.
No.
Okay.
Not from my understanding.
But it sounds like, and I think to Mr. Billings' point, it really is going to be between Mr. Billings and the 2 brothers, Mr. Wilhoite.
Yes.
And because it is their property, those are the three parties that'll have to come to an agreement on the type of gate that will be allowed there.
Yes, and as far,
Go ahead, David.
and as far as what, we're talking about this gate and there's no fence. Well, a fence is, kids want to go to Mallard Point, they'll cut the fence or climb the fence or however. You're going to have traffic whichever way you do it. Why not have the gate there for the emergency vehicles? If it can happen, that's my personal opinion. Because no matter what, with a fence, without a fence, whatever, there's going to be traffic because you're going to build X number of houses, and that means X number more people. So, that's just my personal opinion.
Right.
Would this
Thank you,
commission
Mr. Vest.
feel more comfortable if we continued this or postponed it so that we could, Mr. Billings could get us a couple of pictures of the development that he's had these in before we make it?
I would hate to just postpone it just because of a gate. I would hope that maybe as both an attorney and of course the property owners, both Mr. Wilhoite's, can come to some type of agreement, possibly with some of the input from Mallard Point and their HOA and or Mr. Smith and Mr. Coons and Mr. Talbot, but I don't think they have a say into what the gate would look like. No offense, please. But I think it's really up to Mr. Billings and then of course, more importantly, to the Wilhoite's satisfaction, because as long as it's going to be enough for them and they feel comfortable that the gate will not be small enough or maybe not wide enough so that kids or people don't just go around it. Because I think to David Vest's point is, if you put one bar across the road and two posts, one on each side of the road, I guarantee every kid's going to go up it, over it, around it. And if you don't build it right, there's going to be cars that are going to go around those posts. Because I've seen that myself. So I'm sure the Wilhoites are going to have a lot of input into it. And
Absolutely.
It's going to happen. Mr. Billings and his applicants are going to make sure that it's built right. So I'd hate to postpone this just because we want to see a picture of a gate.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, what I have imagined is just to talk to the chair or to the commission about a process that I haven't articulated is what we really needed to know is tonight whether we're headed in the right direction, we have an approval. And the next step then is for us to sit down with the Wilhoites and go through the terms of this easement, which will include the things like the buffers between, do they or don't they want a fence? I don't know that answer. What type of gate is aesthetically pleasing? Do they want us to pay them money and they'll construct the road, or do they want us to construct the access road and then pay them additional consideration? Those are the types of things. We have a engineer document will have to be drafted to attach to the plat. Are there other things we want, like signage that they need to have there? Like postings on both sides, probably down at their property entrance from Drake Lane that says not, public drive, or says private drive. We need ones on the HOA side. We need to involve the fire department as to what gate is acceptable to them. Those are a lot of the mechanical and technical things that I guess I hadn't discussed earlier tonight, mainly because until we know is a fire emergency access easement an acceptable condition of approval for phase 4, we didn't know how to go and finalize those terms.
Well, I know somebody in this meeting said you can't put the cart before the horse. So and I do ask the commission to keep this in mind. This approval is just to say we are going to approve this application based on all the conditions, all the variances that are given before us. At this point, if we even approve this, whether it's a full-blown street, an access gate for emergency purposes only, or an approval with no access at all, the Billings, the Wilhoite, everybody still has to work all the details out again after the fact. So we're not approving everything in the sense of the type of gate, the type of road, that still has to be worked out between Mr. Billings and the two Mr. Wilhoites. All we're doing at this point as planning and zoning is approving this application with these variances, with these conditions. and there's still a lot of details that need to be worked out. And one of the things, if you all remember, everybody who was at the workshop especially, an approval today doesn't guarantee that Attorney Billings and his applicant and the two Wilhoite brothers can even come to terms. They may not come to terms. But if we prove it with the condition of a emergency gate and they can't come to terms, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Perkins, they may have to come back to us. If we approve it requiring an emergency gate, and let's say the Wilhoites and Billings client can't come to terms, they would in fact have to come back to us.
Yes, sir, because they couldn't build until they satisfied that condition.
So again, keep that in mind. If we're going to approve this tonight or deny it, I mean, I'm leaning towards possibly an approval. I'd like to, of course, that is going to be one of the conditions, and they can't build if they come to terms with the two Wilhoite brothers. So please keep that in mind.
Joe, can you remind me, is condition 2 going to remain the same as what it is in our packet, or did you say that was reworded? Applicant shall provide a gate accessible by emergency services at the rear property boundary and a hard surface access road connection to Drake Lane, approved by County Fire Department. Is that still?
Yeah, that if you're leaning towards approval with the emergency access, you can leave that the same. I just changed it on my PowerPoint presentation to kind of clarify what the staff position was. But yeah, that could remain the same. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead and make the motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
then I will make a motion for approval of PSP 2020-43 with the 3 variances and 12 conditions put forth by the staff.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mifflin.
I'll second that motion.
Who said second? Mr. Stone. Thank you, Mr. Stone. So I've got a first and a motion by Mr. Mifflin to approve. I've got a second by Mr. Stone. What I'd like to do, just for the record, let's do a roll call. And for the record, Dewan, it looks like he's not here this evening. And who else are we missing? Oh, Byron. So those are the only 2 that we're missing. So I'll kind of go through the roll call.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, I was sorry, I had my microphone on mute, but I may have missed it, but on condition 6, was that second sentence struck motion or was it left as is with respect to the HOA documents? I may have missed the comment, I wasn't sure.
I don't think we even mentioned, I think we included number 6. Did we need to change it?
In my presentation, I just asked to leave number 6, but strike the second sentence that said shall be made a part of Harbor Village just because of the legal issue.
True, because they have to come to an agreement. Charlie, are you okay with striking that last sentence off of number 6? And if so, Mr. Mifflin, of course, if you're okay, and then Mr. Stone, okay with striking that off. And
Mr. Chairman, I would be fine with that because the current HOA just in no way has to approve that. They have to approve it if it's going to be approved. But I mean, there's no way we can make them do it. There's no way Mr. Billings can make them do it. The important thing I think is they have to have an HOA that's at least comparable to the standards of what's already there in Harbor Village. If, as Mr. Billings says, his is going to be to that level or more, I think that really should suffice. If they work it out, that's even better.
And I think most of us on the commission know Mr. Billings very, very well spoken when it comes to HOAs. So I'm sure we'll him to the higher standard.
He does know a little about that.
Yes, he does.
And Mr. Summers has seen my draft restrictions. If you have questions about him, he can, I think he can tell you they are equal to, at least equal to Harbor Village.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Billings. So with that being said, Mr. Mifflin, you still okay with the first and then Mr. Stone second to approve?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go through a roll call just because I think it's worthy of a roll call. So We'll start, motion would be yes to approve this application with all variances and conditions in front of us. So I'll start with Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Smith, yes. Mrs. Singer?
Yes.
Yes. Mrs. Mizell?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Mifflin?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Yes, and I think I'm the last one, and as the chair, I'll say yes. Thank you all. I appreciate everyone's time, the attendance, the people who spoke tonight. Again, we always appreciate all the input and thought that goes into an approval process. So again, I know it's been a long night. Thank you all. Mr. Billings, of course, you and the applicants need to get in there to P&Z and sign documentation, and then Charlie will sign off on it afterwards.
Yes, sir. Go to staff's office or Charlie's office?
Staff first.
Okay.
Art.
Thank you.
We're not
Yes.
done.
No, I know. No, I know. We've got, look, I think we got one more thing on the agenda, not an application, but it's the Kentucky Model Solar Zoning Ordinance. And Matt's going to be quick, he promised, because it's 9:30, Matt.
I don't think quick is quick enough.
Oh, it will not be quick enough.
Yeah, so we talked last month a little bit about the model ordinance that the Kentucky Resource Council put out regarding solar farms for just to use the more common term for them. So in that model ordinance, it discussed setbacks of 50 feet from property lines or 100 feet from any residence or sort of a more protected use of such as that. So last month the commission asked me to look to see what setbacks were being used in other communities, and so I did look at some other communities in Kentucky that have passed standards. There are not many. I did hear about a couple other ones this afternoon, and I haven't had a chance to look at them and add them to this table, but basically Winchester and Owensboro / Davis County both use the setbacks as listed in the model ordinance. Warren County, Bowling Green, the setbacks that they have applied are 1,000 feet from property boundaries, as well as 2,000 feet from residences, schools, hospitals, etc. I will point out those are the same setbacks that the state siting board has for these type facilities. I don't think that those are a good idea. Just my professional opinion. I don't think setbacks of that type are appropriate, and I think they could sort of constitute a sort of an illegal prohibition of these type uses. I did look in some of my resources. I found the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, I think it was, had a model ordinance. They recommended that local governments in Virginia use whatever setbacks would be applicable to the zoning district in which the farm was proposed. And then I did find a Minnesota nonprofit had a model ordinance as well that recommended a setback of 150 feet from residences, as well as 150 feet or 100 feet from the center line of state and local roads. So I guess my recommendation after looking at some of this is that, I think that if we wanted to have established setbacks for these, that they probably be closer to what Winchester, Owensboro, and Davis County have adopted. We can make them slightly larger, but I don't think it would be appropriate at all to go anywhere near as drastic as Warren County, Bowling Green did.
I think the 100 feet is 100. Well, I would say 100 feet boundary, not up to the nearest residence, but
yeah,
I think 50 is maybe a little close, especially if you're talking about a large scale solar farm.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Matt, go back to your first slide. So, about the fourth bullet point down, setbacks are not required for where the property line is shared by 2 or more participating landowners.
That's
Yeah,
for a
so-
large solar farm.
Yeah, so with a very large solar farm, you might have multiple. The developer may have negotiated with multiple farm owners.
Right.
And so basically, that's just saying where those multiple farm owners share boundaries, we wouldn't require a 100 or 50-foot setback along those properties.
It would continue straight on through.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't know if any of you had any additional thoughts on some of this. If and whether or not you do, I think that what I may try to do for next month's meeting, if you guys are agreeable, is I'll probably try to work mostly using the model ordinance that the Resource Council developed to sort of bring a draft model to the Planning Commission. We can maybe discuss it next month before we, maybe look to do a public hearing in January.
Yeah, I think you're right about Bowling Green. If you you make it 1,000 or 2,000 feet, you're going to be looking for a long time to find a place that's that isolated.
Yeah, but 100 feet's not very far.
You think 100's not enough
I personally don't.
around the boundary?
Yeah, I'd say at least 150, 200. What does that sound like, Matt?
I think that could work if that's the way the commission would like to see it. What we might be able to do, I'll try to see if I can maybe try to come up with like a sample of what something like that might look like, and we can maybe look at an image that kind of compares what a 50-foot setback, 100-foot setback, and maybe 150 and 200 would look like.
I think that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 50 feet's probably not enough, but 100, 150 feet's probably fine.
Yeah,
and I'm sure if you have neighbors that don't object to it, I think but I guess the problem is if the existing neighbor may not be the neighbor that has to deal with it. These things are 20, 25, sometimes 50 years, Well,
and you think about cell towers, they sure aren't pretty either. Neither are these solar panels. I mean, you go buy any solar farm, there's a couple of them along the highways or expressways, depending on what you call them. And I mean, I'll be honest, I sure the heck wouldn't want to live close to them. So 100 feet, from the edge, from the boundary or the border or property line, I guess you could say, that's really not that far. Now we would require, I think I've read through it a little bit. We would require, shrubbery, bushes, things like that,
Oh yeah.
line. So it wouldn't hopefully be too visible to a homeowner. You would hope that, you would think they wouldn't have to see them at all, even if it was a 2-story home.
Yeah, I think so. So at least as far as, some of the visuals from the neighboring property owners, the hope is that, that those landscaping buffers, once they have time to mature, they would ideally screen most of the view from neighboring property owners. Because at least from what I was seeing when I was looking into this, a lot of these, ground mounted panels are only about 20 or so feet tall, maybe in some cases 30. But if you're given a decent landscaping buffer a chance to grow up, it would certainly at least soften that view. And in some cases, depending on the lay of the land, may make it not visible from neighboring properties.
And the other thing is a lot of these, from what I understand, a lot of these solar farms, once they're approved and if they're built A lot of them will build the 8-foot chain link fence around the perimeter of the project, and just for safety and, you know, to keep kids and other animals and whatever out. I guess you got to keep the deer and everything else out of there too.
Yeah.
So maybe they can make that a green fence or something instead of a normal chain link fence, provide a little screening.
Well, usually.
Is there anything beyond this page?
Pardon?
No, I just really had the 2 pages, the one that showed what was in the model ordinance, and then the one where I showed some setbacks from other communities.
Yeah.
You're not going to find these in residential areas anyway. A developer like this is going to have them out away from
right
anything.
Yeah, I think in general they mostly look for more agricultural areas. Because you know they have to negotiate then with fewer property owners, but also you know, like you said, there's less of a turnout, I guess, from public meetings if there's not a large number of residences that are nearby. Okay.
Do you want to? Is this just to look at this month?
Yeah, I mean this is just to look at it. And if anyone had any other comments, I can take those and try to, you know, if there's any other information you all would like me to provide next month when hopefully we'll have a draft ordinance ready for a first look.
Right.
Just let me know.
I'm like you. I think Warren County and Bowling Green, they've basically just banned solar farms. 2,000 feet does be difficult to find a place.
Yeah.
Well, and on top of that, 1,000 feet from the boundary of the site, my gosh, it'd have to be a lot of wasted space around the perimeter.
Yeah, no return on your money there.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? It is late. Holy cow, it's 9:36. Anybody have anything good of the group? Thank you, everybody, for unfortunately a very long meeting. But I think we got some great information from everybody.
I will say I stand corrected. I thought we needed 2 roads connected there, and I was very wrong.
At least according to the people that live right there.
Right. Yeah, I think they're fairly set in their ways. They're going to stay isolated.
Anybody got anything else good for the meeting? Otherwise, I'd like a motion from somebody to adjourn.
The chair just dropped the hammer.
All right, well, you know what? I don't have the hammer. We're in quarantine, and Joe, I'm thinking at next package, you're gonna have to drop that hammer off with my package.
All right, just throw down one of those dishes behind you.
No, Joe, just keep it till hopefully we meet sooner than later. Because I'm way beyond and past wanting to get to meet back in person. I know I've had a couple commissioners reach out to me. I'll try and make this real quick. Of a little frustration of wanting to meet in person, you know, versus this Zoom meeting. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? I'll be honest, my personal opinion, I don't think so, because cases keep rising.
It's getting much worse. I don't think
it seems to be getting much worse. At least that's what the media keeps telling us. But, you know, believe believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. So, yeah. Charlie, I'm gonna argue on that one.
Check out the morgue trucks that are lining up in a number of communities. No, sir, we're not close.
I think it's starting at the earliest.
Unfortunately, I used to say that I don't know anybody that's got it or don't even know, and it's starting to get closer and closer to home every day as we speak. So
yeah, I said that just a couple of months ago, and now I've got in double figures.
I was going to say, I know quite a few people in our community that have had it. And it's, like I said, starting to get closer and closer to home as we speak. So everybody be safe, wear your masks. Let's try to comply. And maybe one of these days, this thing will go away.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
That's what I was gonna say. Happy
Everybody as well.
Thanksgiving,
Happy
guys.
Thanksgiving
And
to all.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Good night.
All right, good night.